Jack Miller thought protecting his daughter meant staying invisible. Then one morning in a coffee shop, he made a choice that would expose everything he'd carefully hidden: his past, his pain, and the kind of man he'd sworn never to be again. When billionaire Evelyn Cross witnessed a construction worker defend her without asking for anything in return, she saw something her wealth could never buy: genuine strength. But as she pulled back the layers of Jack's guarded life, she discovered a truth that would test them both. Some men aren't afraid of falling in love. They're afraid of what love might cost the people they're trying to protect. Stay with me until the end of this story. It's one you won't forget. And if it touches you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Jack and Evelyn's journey travels. The alarm clock's buzz cut through the pre-dawn darkness at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before Jack Miller needed it to. He'd been awake for an hour already, lying perfectly still in the small bedroom of his rented duplex, listening to the rhythm of his daughter's breathing through the baby monitor on his nightstand. Some habits from the before time never died. The hypervigilance, the inability to fully rest, the need to confirm every few hours that Lily was still breathing, still safe, still there. He silenced the alarm before it could wake her and swung his legs out of bed, his bare feet finding the cool hardwood floor. 42 years old, and his body still moved like a soldier's, efficient, economical, ready. The mirror in the bathroom showed him what 5 years of single fatherhood looked like. Gray threading through dark hair at the temples, lines carved deeper around eyes that had seen too much, shoulders that carried weight even when standing still. The shower ran cold for the first 30 seconds. Jack didn't mind. He'd learned to find comfort in discomfort, to trust only what he could control. Hot water was a luxury. Clean water was a necessity. The distinction mattered when you'd spent enough time in places where neither was guaranteed. By 6:15, he was dressed, worn jeans, a faded flannel shirt over a thermal steel-toed boots that had seen better years. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed, filling the small kitchen with the one scent that made this rented space feel remotely like home. He poured the first cup into a travel mug, then started a second pot. Lily would be up soon, and morning rituals mattered to 4-year-olds the way coordinates mattered to artillery units, absolute and non-negotiable. The duplex was small, but clean. Jack kept it that way with military precision, not because he was naturally tidy, but because chaos in the environment meant chaos in the mind, and he couldn't afford chaos, not with Lily depending on him. The living room held a second-hand couch, a coffee table he'd refinished himself, and a corner dedicated entirely to his daughter's kingdom. Plastic castle, stuffed animals arranged with the careful hierarchy only a preschooler could devise, art supplies and labeled bins. On the wall hung exactly 3 photographs. One of Lily at 2 years old, gap-toothed and covered in birthday cake. One of Jack and Sarah on their wedding day, young and stupid with hope. And one of all 3 of them taken 6 months before the accident, before cancer turned Sarah's smile into something brave and brittle, before Jack learned that some battles you can't win no matter how hard you fight. He didn't look at that last photograph much anymore. The grief had dulled from a knife edge to a constant ache, manageable as long as he stayed in motion, stayed useful, stayed focused on the one person who still needed him. "Daddy?" The small voice came from the hallway, accompanied by the shuffle of footed pajamas on hardwood. Jack turned to find Lily standing in the kitchen doorway, blonde hair sleep-tangled, clutching the stuffed elephant that went everywhere she did. "Morning, Buttercup?" He crouched down, opening his arms, and she patted over to collapse against his chest, with the full-body trust that children gave so freely and adults guarded so carefully. "Sleep okay?" "Mm-hmm. Mr. Trunks had a nightmare, though." "Did he?" Jack stood, lifting her with him, feeling the pleasant weight of her in his arms. "What about?" "Monsters. But I told him monsters aren't real, and even if they were, you'd punch them." "That's right. I would." He carried her to the kitchen table and settled her into her booster seat. "But you know what's even better than punching monsters?" "What?" "Not letting them scare you in the first place." He tapped her nose gently. "Pancakes or oatmeal?" "Pancakes. Pancakes it is." The morning routine unfolded with practiced ease. Jack mixed batter while Lily narrated Mr. Trunks' opinion on everything from the weather to the questionable decision to have maple syrup instead of chocolate chips. He'd learned to function on this kind of conversation, half real, half imagination, entirely essential to maintaining the normal childhood Sarah had made him promise to give their daughter. Promise me, Jack. Promise me she won't grow up feeling the weight of this. Promise me she'll have pancakes and play dates and a daddy who smiles. He'd made that promise in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and ending things. He'd held Sarah's hand and sworn he'd do it, even though they both knew he had no idea how. Smiling didn't come naturally to men who'd spent their 20s in desert combat zones. Normal didn't come easy to someone whose idea of problem-solving involved tactical assessment and overwhelming force. But he'd learned. God, how he'd learned. By 7:30, Lily was dressed in her favorite purple overalls and rainbow shirt, a combination that made absolutely no aesthetic sense, but represented crucial decision-making autonomy, according to the parenting books Jack had studied like military manuals. Her blonde hair was braided with the slightly uneven technique of a man who'd watched 17 YouTube tutorials and still couldn't quite master the complexity of small motor movements involving another person's hair. "You look beautiful," he said, meaning it. "I look like a rainbow. The most beautiful rainbow in Colorado." She giggled, and the sound did what it always did. Eased something tight in Jack's chest, reminded him why he got up every morning, why he'd traded officer's insignia for a carpenter's belt, why he measured success now in bedtime stories instead of mission completions. The drive to Little Learner's preschool took 20 minutes through morning traffic. Jack used the time the way he always did, half listening to Lily's chatter while running through the day's mental checklist. Job site at 8, foundation pour if the weather held, lumber delivery to confirm, invoice to submit, pick up Lily at 4. Dinner. He had chicken thawing, could do stir-fry. Bath time at 7. Stories at 7:30. Lights out by 8. Structure, routine, control. The only variables that mattered were the ones he could anticipate and plan for. "Daddy, can we get hot chocolate?" The question came as they stopped at a red light 2 blocks from the preschool. Jack glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 7:52. 8 minutes to drop off. If they stopped, he'd be cutting it close to make the job site by 8, but Dave wouldn't start the pour without him anyway, and Lily asked for so little. "Sure, Buttercup. Quick stop." Her delighted squeal made the decision worthwhile. The coffee shop was a local place called Morningside Brew, the kind of establishment that predated corporate chains and survived on loyalty and location. Jack had been coming here since he and Sarah first moved to the neighborhood, back when she was pregnant and craving their cinnamon rolls, back when the future felt navigable. He found street parking half a block down and helped Lily out of her car seat. She immediately reached for his hand, another habit from the before time, when Sarah's illness had made the world feel unstable, and Daddy's hand was the one constant that never wavered. The morning air was crisp with October's first real bite. Jack could smell coffee and baked goods and the particular scent of a Colorado autumn, pine and possibility and the warning of winter at the edges. The shop's windows glowed warm against the gray morning, and through the glass, Jack could see the usual crowd. Laptop warriors claiming corner tables, construction crews grabbing quick fuel, professionals in their careful business casual. He pushed open the door, triggering the small bell that announced arrivals, and guided Lily toward the counter. That's when he saw her. She stood third in line, a woman so carefully composed she seemed to occupy a different atmosphere than everyone else in the shop. Tall, probably late 30s, wearing a charcoal suit that whispered expensive in every seam. Dark hair pulled back in a way that suggested control rather than style. Posture that spoke of boardrooms and bottom lines. But it was her face that caught Jack's attention. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, in that particular way that came from excellent bone structure and the resources to maintain it, but because of her expression, carefully neutral, professionally blank. The kind of face you learn to wear when showing emotion was a liability. Jack recognized it because he'd worn the same face for years. "Daddy, I want the one with the marshmallows." "We'll see what they have, Buttercup." The line moved forward. Jack kept Lily close, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder, automatically assessing the space the way he always did. Exits, crowd density, potential potential hazards. Old habits didn't die. They just found new contexts. The woman in the expensive suit ordered something complicated. Half-calf almond milk latte with an extra shot and sugar-free vanilla. The barista, a kid who couldn't be more than 20, nodded with the glazed expression of someone who'd stopped processing the words and just focused on the rhythm. 2 people ahead of them in line now. A man in a business suit, mid-40s, carrying himself with the aggressive confidence of someone who believed the world owed him deference. And between him and the woman, a small gap that suggested intentional distance. Jack felt it before he saw it. That shift in atmosphere that combat veterans learn to recognize. The change in ambient tension that preceded violence or confrontation or crisis. The man moved closer to the woman, not accidentally, not casually, with purpose. You know, you could smile more. His voice carried clearly in the morning quiet, pitched just loud enough to be heard, but not loud enough to seem like he was causing a scene. You'd be prettier if you smiled. The woman's expression didn't change. She didn't turn, didn't acknowledge him, didn't give him the reaction he was fishing for, which, predictably, made him escalate. Hey, I'm talking to you. He moved closer still, invading the careful space she'd maintained. It's just a compliment. You don't have to be such a... Jack didn't make a conscious decision to move. His body simply acted, responding to a threat assessment that bypassed cognitive processing entirely. 3 steps forward, positioning himself between the man and the woman, one hand still resting on Lily's shoulder, the other hanging loose at his side. Back up. 2 words. Quiet. Absolutely certain. The man turned, clearly ready to redirect his aggression toward this new target, then stopped. Whatever he saw in Jack's face made him recalculate. Jack knew what he saw. He'd seen it in the mirror often enough. The expression of someone who dealt with real threats and wouldn't blink at this manufactured one. The posture of a man who didn't need to puff himself up because he knew exactly what he was capable of and felt no need to prove it. I was just... No, you weren't. Jack's voice remained conversational. No anger, no heat, just fact. You were harassing this woman because you felt entitled to her attention. Now you're going to step back, get your coffee, and leave. And you're going to think very carefully about whether you want to make this into something it doesn't need to be. The silence in the coffee shop had shifted. People were watching now, phones probably already out, ready to record whatever happened next. The man looked at Jack, looked at the woman, looked at the growing audience, made the calculation that men like him always made when confronted with actual consequences instead of abstract ones. Whatever, she's not even that hot anyway. He turned and walked out, abandoning his place in line, his dignity intact in his own mind and shredded in everyone else's. Jack waited until the door closed behind him, then stepped back into his original position, hand still resting on Lily's shoulder. The line moved forward. That was very kind of you. The voice came from behind him, cultured, controlled, with an accent that suggested expensive private schools somewhere in the Northeast. Jack glanced back to find the woman looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. No big deal, he said. It was to me. Jack nodded once, uncomfortable with the attention, then turned back to face the counter. They were next in line. The barista, wide-eyed and clearly processing what had just happened, looked at him with something between gratitude and nervousness. What can I get you? Large black coffee and 1 hot chocolate with marshmallows. Jack pulled out his wallet. Whatever she's having too. He tilted his head back toward the woman without looking at her. On me. Oh, you don't need to... Already done. He handed over a $20 bill, accepted his change, and guided Lily toward the pickup counter. Behind him, he could hear the woman ordering again, her voice slightly less certain than before. The drinks came quickly. Jack accepted both cups, gave Lily her hot chocolate with careful instructions about not spilling in the car, and turned toward the exit. Wait. The woman's voice again closer now. I'd like to know your name, to thank you properly. Jack paused at the door, looking back at her fully for the first time. She was studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable, not because it was inappropriate, but because it was thorough. The kind of assessment that came from someone used to evaluating people, reading them, determining their value. Jack, he said finally, and this is Lily." "Hi," Lily waved, hot chocolate sloshing dangerously close to the cup's rim. "Hello, Lily. I'm Evelyn." The woman's expression softened fractionally, something almost like genuine warmth crossing her features. "That's a very pretty name." "Thank you. Daddy says I'm named after a flower." "Lily is indeed a flower, a beautiful one." "We should go." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "Don't want to be late." "Of course." Evelyn extended her hand. "Thank you again, Jack, truly." He shook it briefly. Her grip was firm, her hand cool, her gaze still too searching, then pushed through the door and out into the October morning. Lily chattered all the way to the car about the pretty lady and the mean man and how Daddy had been very brave but also very polite. Jack made appropriate sounds of acknowledgement while his mind worked through the interaction, filing it away as something unusual but ultimately inconsequential. He had no way of knowing that the woman standing in Morningside Brew, watching through the window as his truck pulled away, was Evelyn Cross, founder and CEO of Cross Industries, Forbes-listed billionaire, one of the most powerful people in Colorado's business landscape. He had no way of knowing that she'd just pulled out her phone and was making a call to her personal assistant, voice quiet but certain. Find out everything you can about a man named Jack, mid-40s, construction worker, drives a blue Ford F-150, has a daughter named Lily. I want a full report by noon. He had no way of knowing that his simple act of decency had just set something in motion that would dismantle the careful, controlled life he'd built from the rubble of his grief. All Jack knew, as he dropped Lily at preschool and headed to the job site, was that he'd done what any decent person would do. He'd stepped in when someone needed help. He'd left before it could become complicated. And in his world, in the careful structure he maintained, that was exactly how it was supposed to work. Simple, clean, uncomplicated. The foundation pour went smoothly. Jack worked alongside his crew, 3 guys he'd known for 2 years, good workers who showed up on time and didn't ask questions about his past. Dave Morrison, the site foreman, was ex-Navy, which meant they understood each other's silences. Carlos and Miguel were brothers from El Paso who worked with the kind of precision that came from pride in craft rather than external pressure. By noon, they'd finished the pour and were cleaning up when Dave called a lunch break. "Miller, you got a second?" Jack looked up from where he was hosing down tools, found Dave standing with his arms crossed, expression thoughtful. "What's up?" "Company called. Want to know if you'd be interested in running the Riverside project." Jack straightened slowly. The Riverside project was a major commercial development, 3 buildings, 18 months of work, significant responsibility. The kind of opportunity that came with better pay, longer hours, and complexity he'd specifically been avoiding. "I'll think about it." "It's good money, Jack, real good money. Could set you and Lily up nice." "I know. I'll think about it." Dave nodded, reading the subtext correctly. Jack Miller wasn't a man who made decisions quickly or shared his reasoning. He was reliable, skilled, and utterly self-contained. It made him an excellent employee and an enigmatic person. Lunch was the usual: sandwich from home, coffee from the thermos, 15 minutes of sitting in his truck with the radio playing classic rock at low volume. Jack used the time to check his phone. 1 text from Little Learners confirming Lily's pickup time. 1 email about the parent-teacher conference next week. Nothing urgent, nothing complicated. The afternoon passed in the rhythm of physical labor, the satisfaction of concrete work, of building things that would last, of measuring success in level lines and square corners. This was the part of his new life that made sense. Construction didn't require emotional complexity. It required precision, strength, and attention to detail. Jack had all 3 in abundance. At 3:45, he cleaned up, said goodbye to the crew, and headed to pick up Lily. She burst out of the preschool door at 4:02, backpack bouncing, face bright with the particular joy of 4-year-olds who'd had a good day. "Daddy, we painted today, and I made you a picture." "Can't wait to see it, Buttercup." The drive home included a detailed narration of preschool politics, who played with whom at recess, who got a timeout for not sharing, who brought the best snack. Jack listened with the part of his brain that had learned to track multiple inputs simultaneously, while another part ran through dinner options and evening logistics. They were 2 blocks from home when Lily said, Daddy, there's a fancy car behind us. Jack's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Black Mercedes SUV, tinted windows, following at a careful distance. Probably nothing. Rich neighborhood adjacent to theirs. Lots of expensive cars. Except it had been 3 cars back when they left the preschool. And it had made the same turns he had. Old instincts kicked in. Jack took an unnecessary right turn, watching the mirror. The Mercedes followed. He made another turn, this one leading away from their duplex. The Mercedes maintained position. Buttercup, we're going to make a quick stop at the grocery store, okay? Okay! Jack pulled into the Safeway parking lot, chose a spot near the entrance with good sight lines, and shut off the engine. The Mercedes pulled in 3 spaces down. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened and Evelyn Cross stepped out. She looked different in daylight, without the coffee shop's warm interior lighting. More intimidating. The charcoal suit had been replaced by dark jeans and a cream cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Jack's monthly rent. But the effect was the same. Carefully controlled, deliberately composed. She walked toward his truck with the confidence of someone used to approaching situations on her own terms. Jack rolled down his window. Mr. Miller. Her voice was professionally pleasant. I apologize for the dramatic approach. I tried to find your contact information through more conventional means, but you're remarkably difficult to locate. That's intentional. Jack kept his voice neutral. Can I help you with something, Ms. Cross? Evelyn Cross. She paused, as if the name should mean something. When Jack's expression didn't change, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. I wanted to thank you again for this morning, and to ask if you'd be willing to join me for lunch tomorrow. Why? The directness clearly caught her off guard. People probably didn't question Evelyn Cross's invitations often. Because I'd like to know more about the man who helped me without expecting anything in return. You already know what you need to know. I did what anyone should do. That's it. I disagree. She leaned slightly closer to the truck, and Jack caught a scent that was probably perfume, but smelled like money. Subtle, expensive, entirely foreign to his world. I found that how people behave when they have nothing to gain tells me everything I need to know about their character. And I'd like to know more about yours. Daddy, is that the pretty lady from the coffee shop? Lily's voice cut through the tension, bright and curious. Evelyn's expression softened immediately, the professional mask cracking to reveal something more genuine. Hello again, Lily. Did you enjoy your hot chocolate? Yes, it had 6 marshmallows. 6? That sounds perfect. Jack felt the situation sliding away from him, becoming something more complicated than he wanted to deal with. Ms. Cross, Evelyn, please. Evelyn. The name felt strange in his mouth, too intimate for someone he'd met 3 hours ago. I appreciate the invitation, but I'm not sure what you're expecting from this lunch. Conversation. Nothing more. She pulled a business card from her pocket and handed it through the window. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. My direct number is on the back. If you change your mind, call me. Jack took the card reflexively, then watched as she walked back to the Mercedes, got in, and drove away with the unhurried certainty of someone who'd said what she came to say and felt no need to linger. He looked down at the card. Evelyn Cross. Chief Executive Officer, Cross Industries. Is she your friend, Daddy? No, Buttercup. Just someone I helped this morning. She seems nice. She seems complicated. Inside the grocery store, while Lily picked out vegetables with the seriousness of a surgeon choosing instruments, Jack's mind kept returning to the card in his pocket. To the woman who'd followed him across town just to invite him to lunch. To the warning bells going off in the part of his brain that had kept him alive through 2 combat deployments. This woman, this billionaire CEO who lived in a world so far removed from his that they might as well be different species, wanted something from him. Maybe she didn't know what yet. Maybe she told herself it was just gratitude or curiosity. But Jack had learned the hard way that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. When people from different worlds collided, someone usually got hurt, and he had Lily to think about. Lily, who was currently debating the merits of broccoli versus green beans with the intensity of a philosopher tackling existence itself. Lily, who depended on him to make smart choices, to keep their life stable and safe. That night, after dinner and bath time and 3 stories instead of the usual 2, Jack sat on the edge of Lily's bed, watching her drift off to sleep. "Daddy?" Her voice was drowsy, eyes already half closed.
"Yeah, Buttercup? When you helped that lady today, did it make you happy?" Jack thought about it, about the feeling in his chest when he'd stepped between Evelyn and the aggressive stranger. Not pride, exactly. More like alignment. Like for a moment, he'd been the person Sarah always believed he could be, instead of the person his past had tried to make him. "Yeah," he said finally, "I guess it did." "Good. Mommy would be happy too." The words hit him like a gut punch. Not painful exactly, but powerful enough to take his breath. Lily almost never mentioned Sarah anymore. Jack didn't know if that was normal for a 4-year-old or something he should be worried about. Another thing to add to the list of parenting challenges he was figuring out one day at a time. "She would be," he agreed softly. "Now sleep. Tomorrow's another day."
He sat there long after Lily's breathing evened out into sleep, watching the nightlight cast soft shadows across her room, thinking about the business card in his wallet and the woman who'd given it to him. Evelyn Cross wanted to have lunch, to talk, to get to know him. And Jack wanted, what exactly? He wanted his life to stay simple, predictable, safe. He wanted to be enough for his daughter without needing anyone else. He wanted to stop feeling like he was one crisis away from falling apart. But what he told himself, as he stood and walked quietly out of Lily's room, was that he wanted nothing from Evelyn Cross. She belonged to a world he'd left behind when he'd traded his officer's uniform for a carpenter's belt. A world where people networked and strategized and saw other humans as assets to be leveraged. He'd have his coffee tomorrow at a different shop. He'd forget about billionaires and expensive perfume and the way Evelyn's eyes had tracked him with the precision of someone solving a particularly interesting puzzle. He'd keep his life simple. That was the plan. But that night, lying in bed unable to sleep, Jack kept seeing Evelyn's face when she'd looked at Lily, the way her professional mask had cracked, the genuine warmth that had flickered through her careful control. And he wondered, just for a moment, just in the dangerous quiet of 2 a.m. when his defenses were down, what it might be like to be seen by someone like that. Not as a project or a curiosity, but as a person worth knowing. Then he reminded himself that wondering was dangerous. Hope was a luxury he couldn't afford, and billionaires didn't invite construction workers to lunch because they wanted friendship. They wanted something. And Jack Miller had nothing to give except the one thing he'd sworn to protect, the fragile, carefully constructed life he'd built for his daughter. So he'd decline, politely, but firmly. Tomorrow. The decision made, Jack finally drifted into uneasy sleep, unaware that across town, in a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights, Evelyn Cross sat at her desk reading a report on a man named Jack Miller, former Army officer, distinguished service, honorable discharge, married to Sarah Chen Miller, deceased 3 years ago from ovarian cancer, single father to Lily Ann Miller, age 4. Current employment, carpenter with Morrison Construction. Residence, rental duplex in a modest neighborhood. Credit score, excellent. Criminal record, none. Social media presence, non-existent. On paper, Jack Miller was unremarkable, a working-class single father doing his best. But Evelyn hadn't built a billion-dollar company by trusting paper assessments. She'd watched the way Jack moved in that coffee shop, the absolute certainty, the controlled power, the way he'd positioned himself between her and a threat without hesitation, then walked away without requiring acknowledgement. She'd spent her entire adult life surrounded by men who wanted something from her. Money, access, validation, the association with her name and her resources. Jack Miller had wanted nothing, and that made him either the most genuine person she'd met in 20 years or the most dangerous. Evelyn intended to find out which. She picked up her phone and sent a text to her assistant. "Clear my schedule for lunch tomorrow. I have a meeting." Then she turned off her desk lamp and walked to the windows, looking out at the city she'd conquered through will and strategy and the refusal to accept limitations. Somewhere out there, in a small duplex with a daughter sleeping safely in the next room, Jack Miller was probably asleep by now, probably not thinking about her at all. But Evelyn Cross hadn't gotten where she was by accepting rejection. Tomorrow, she'd try again. And this time, she'd make sure Jack Miller understood that her interest wasn't pity or curiosity or some rich person's whim. It was something else entirely. Something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost forgotten what it was like. Genuine intrigue. The kind that made you want to know someone not for what they could do for you, but for who they were when nobody was watching. The kind that was either going to be the best decision she'd ever made or the biggest mistake. But Evelyn Cross hadn't built an empire by playing it safe. And Jack Miller, whether he knew it yet or not, had just become the most interesting puzzle she'd encountered in years. She was going to solve him, one way or another. The next morning arrived with the same relentless punctuality as every other morning, but Jack found himself lying awake before the alarm, staring at the ceiling and thinking about things he'd convinced himself didn't matter. The business card sat on his nightstand where he'd left it last night, heavy cardstock that caught the early light filtering through the blinds, accusatory in its expensive simplicity. He'd decided not to call. That decision had felt solid at 2 a.m., reinforced by logic and self-preservation and the practical reality that people from Evelyn Cross's world didn't mix with people from his. Oil and water, different orbits. The metaphors were endless and all pointed to the same conclusion. Stay in your lane, Miller. But then Lily had padded into his room at 6:15, dragging Mr. Trunks and asking if the pretty lady was going to be their friend, and something in her hopeful expression had made Jack's certainty waver. Children had a way of seeing the world without the protective cynicism adults developed. To Lily, a nice lady who'd smiled at her was just a nice lady. No complications, no hidden agendas. "We'll see, Buttercup," he'd said, which was parent speak for probably not, but I don't want to explain why. Now, standing in Morningside Brew at 7:30 a.m. with Lily chattering about her upcoming show and tell, Jack found himself scanning the shop involuntarily, looking for charcoal suits and composed expressions, and the particular way Evelyn had of occupying space, like she owned it without needing to announce the fact. She wasn't there. The relief he felt was disproportionate and completely unconvincing. "Large black coffee," he told the same barista from yesterday, who gave him a knowing smile that Jack chose to ignore. "And 1 hot chocolate. With marshmallows? 6 of them, apparently. That's the magic number." The barista grinned. "Coming right up. Hey, that was really cool what you did yesterday. That guy was a total creep." Jack shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone would have done it. But they didn't. You did." There wasn't much to say to that, so Jack just nodded and moved to the pickup counter. Lily pressed her face against the pastry display case, conducting a serious evaluation of the morning's offerings. "Daddy, can I have the one with the sprinkles?" "You haven't had breakfast yet." "But it has sprinkles. That's basically vitamins. That's basically sugar." "Sugar gives you energy. You said so." Jack fought back a smile. His daughter had inherited Sarah's razor-sharp logic and his own stubborn persistence. The combination was going to make her teenage years absolutely terrifying. "Tell you what, if you eat a real breakfast when we get home, you can have the sprinkle thing tomorrow." "That's negotiation, right? Like in your army days?" "Something like that."
Did you negotiate with bad guys? Sometimes. Mostly I just followed orders and tried not to get shot at. Lily considered this with the gravity of someone who'd heard bits and pieces of daddies before time, but didn't quite understand what it all meant. "I'm glad you don't do that anymore." "Me too, Buttercup." Their drinks arrived, Jack paid, tipped generously, and guided Lily toward the exit. The morning felt normal again, routine, manageable. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it while Lily skipped ahead to the truck. Unknown number, but the message was clear enough. "Good morning, Jack. I realize I was presumptuous yesterday. Let me try again. Would you be willing to meet for coffee this week? No pressure, just conversation. Evelyn." Jack stared at the message for a long moment. The fact that she had his number wasn't surprising. She'd clearly had him investigated, which should have bothered him more than it did. What surprised him was the tone. No corporate polish. No assumption of compliance. Just a simple request with an acknowledgement that yesterday's approach had been too much. He should delete it. He should block the number and forget about billionaires who followed people to grocery stores. Instead, he found himself typing, "Coffee is fine."
Thursday morning, 8 a.m., Morningside Brew. Her response came within seconds. Perfect. Thank you. Jack pocketed his phone and climbed into the truck, where Lily was already buckled in and singing something about elephants that she'd learned at preschool. He started the engine, pulled into traffic, and tried to ignore the small voice in his head that sounded suspiciously like Sarah asking him when he'd decided to start lying to himself about what he wanted. The job site that day was a renovation project in one of Denver's older neighborhoods, a craftsman house getting converted into a law office. Jack spent the morning installing custom shelving in what would become the library, losing himself in the precise work of measuring and cutting and fitting pieces together with the kind of accuracy that left no room for error or introspection. Dave found him around 11, carrying 2 bottles of water and wearing his "I need to talk about something" expression. Riverside project needs an answer by Friday, Dave said, handing over one of the bottles. They're getting impatient. Jack accepted the water and took a long drink before responding. It's a lot of responsibility. You've handled responsibility before, bigger than this. That was different. How? That was leading men who knew what they were signing up for. This is, Jack gestured vaguely at the shelving. This is building things, making them level and square and permanent. No variables, no chaos. Dave leaned against the wall, studying Jack with the particular understanding of one veteran recognizing another's carefully maintained boundaries. You know it's okay to want more than just getting by, right? I'm not just getting by. I'm providing for my daughter. You're surviving. That's not the same as living. The words hit harder than they should have. Jack set down his tools and turned to face Dave fully. What's that supposed to mean? It means Sarah's been gone 3 years, and you're still acting like you're in triage mode. Like if you stop moving for 5 seconds, everything's going to fall apart. Maybe it will. Or maybe you're so busy controlling everything that you're missing the chance to actually build something. And I'm not talking about shelves. Jack's jaw tightened. I appreciate the concern, but I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a man who's so afraid of losing control that he won't even try to grab onto something good when it shows up. Nothing good has shown up. Dave gave him a look that said he wasn't buying it. That's not what I heard. Word is some high-powered executive tracked you down yesterday, followed you to a grocery store parking lot. Jack closed his eyes. Of course someone had seen. Of course it had become shop gossip. It's nothing. Didn't look like nothing. It's complicated. Life's complicated, Jack. That's not a reason to avoid it. Before Jack could respond, his phone buzzed again. He pulled it out, expecting another message from Evelyn. Instead, it was Little Learner's preschool. He answered immediately, stepping away from Dave. Mr. Miller, this is Director Chen. Everything's fine, but we need you to come pick up Lily. She's had a little incident. Jack's pulse spiked despite her reassurance. What kind of incident? She got upset during group time and locked herself in the bathroom. She won't come out, and she's asking for you. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He hung up and turned to Dave. I have to go. Lily needs me. Go. We've got this covered. Dave's expression had shifted from challenging to concerned. She okay? I don't know yet. The drive to Little Learners took 8 minutes, which would have been 6 if Jack had been willing to break traffic laws. He found Director Chen waiting outside the bathroom door, expression professionally calm but eyes worried. She's been in there about 20 minutes. Won't tell us what's wrong, just keeps asking for Daddy. Jack knocked gently. Buttercup? It's me. Can you open the door? Silence. Then a small, watery voice. Promise you won't be mad? I promise, just open the door, baby. The lock clicked. Jack eased the door open to find Lily sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, eyes red from crying. He crouched down immediately, opening his arms, and she launched herself at him with the full force of 4-year-old desperation. What happened? Jack kept his voice gentle, one hand rubbing her back while she sobbed against his shoulder. Tommy said his mommy makes better cookies than mine, and I said, that's because my mommy is in heaven, and he said, that means she doesn't love me enough to stay, and the words dissolved into fresh tears. Jack felt something sharp twist in his chest. This was what he'd been trying to prevent, the pain, the questions. The inevitable moment when Lily realized that other kids had something she didn't, something that couldn't be replaced by a father's devotion or careful routines or all the love in the world. "Hey, look at me." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Tommy is wrong. Your mommy loved you more than anything in the whole world. She didn't want to leave. Sometimes people get sick, and even when they fight as hard as they can, their bodies just can't keep going. But that has nothing to do with how much they love us. You understand?" Lily nodded, but her lower lip still trembled. "And you know what your mommy told me before she went to heaven? She told me to make sure you grew up knowing exactly how much you were loved. That's my most important job. Not construction, not anything else. Just making sure you know that." "Do you think she can see me? From heaven?" Jack thought about all the things he'd stopped believing in after watching Sarah die by inches in a hospital bed, about faith and fairness, and the idea that good people deserved good outcomes. But looking at his daughter's tear-streaked face, he found himself saying, "Yeah, Buttercup, I think she can, and I think she's really proud of the amazing person you're becoming. Even when I lock myself in bathrooms? Especially then, because you're feeling big feelings and trying to figure out how to handle them. That's what growing up is." Lily wiped her nose on her sleeve. "Can we go home?" "Yeah, we can go home." Director Chen met them in the hallway with Lily's backpack and an apologetic expression. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Miller. We had no idea Tommy would say something like that. We'll be addressing it with his parents." "Kids say thoughtless things. It's not his fault." Jack settled Lily on his hip despite the fact that she was getting too big for it. "We'll see you tomorrow." "Actually, if you need to take the rest of the week, we'll see you tomorrow," Jack repeated firmly. Because running away didn't solve problems. It just taught Lily that difficulty was something to avoid instead of something to face. In the truck, Lily was quiet, clutching Mr. Trunks and staring out the window. Jack navigated traffic while his mind worked through the implications. This wasn't going to be a one-time thing. There would be more Tommies. More moments when Lily confronted the reality that her family looked different from everyone else's. More moments when Jack's best efforts weren't enough to protect her from pain. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was small. "Do you ever get lonely?" The question caught him completely off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "Because you don't have a mommy anymore either, and you don't have friends who come over, just me and you." Jack pulled into their driveway and shut off the engine before answering. "I'm not lonely, Buttercup. I have you. That's enough." "But what if I'm not enough? What if you need a grown-up friend?" "Where is this coming from?" Lily picked at the elephant's worn fabric. "Emma's daddy has a girlfriend now, and she's nice, and Emma says it's okay to still love her mommy and also like the girlfriend. And I just thought, maybe you need someone too." Jack sat very still, processing the fact that his 4-year-old daughter was apparently worried about his social life. "I appreciate you thinking about me, but you don't need to worry about grown-up stuff. That's my job. The pretty lady from the coffee shop liked you." "What?" "I could tell. She looked at you the way the prince looks at the princess in my books." "Lily, I'm just saying, if you wanted a friend, she seemed nice." Jack rubbed his face, caught between amusement and something that felt uncomfortably like being seen through by someone who still believed in princes and princesses. "Let's get inside and have some lunch, okay?" That evening, after Lily had been fed and bathed and read to and tucked in with extra reassurances about maternal love transcending death, Jack sat on the back porch with a beer he wasn't really drinking. The October night was cold enough that he should have gone inside, but the discomfort felt appropriate somehow. His phone sat on the small table beside him, Evelyn's message still visible on the screen. Thursday morning, 8 a.m. He'd agreed to coffee. Simple enough. Casual. He could handle one conversation with a woman who'd shown him a moment of kindness that had somehow gotten tangled up with his daughter's perception that he needed rescuing from loneliness. Except nothing about Evelyn Cross seemed simple. The phone buzzed. Another message. "I realize I'm being persistent, but I wanted to make sure Thursday still works for you. If you'd rather not, I understand." Jack stared at the words for a long moment. The easy thing would be to cancel. To send a polite message about schedules and responsibilities and all the reasonable excuses people use to avoid complications. Instead, he typed, "Thursday works. But I should tell you, I'm not looking for complications." My life is pretty simple, and I'd like to keep it that way. Her response came after a pause long enough that Jack thought maybe he'd scared her off. I'm not offering complications. Just coffee and conversation. I promise to respect whatever boundaries you need. Something about the phrasing made Jack believe her. Or maybe he just wanted to believe her. Either way, he found himself responding, okay, see you Thursday. He set the phone down and took a real drink of the beer this time, letting the cold liquid chase away some of the tightness in his chest. This was fine. He could have coffee with someone. It didn't mean anything. It didn't change anything. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory, the way it sometimes did in quiet moments. Jack, honey, you can't protect yourself from life forever. Sometimes you have to let people in. I let Lily in, he said to the empty porch. That's enough. But even as he said it, he knew he was lying. Thursday morning arrived wrapped in fog and the kind of damp cold that made Jack's old injuries ache in places he usually ignored. He dropped Lily at preschool with extra hugs and reassurances, watching her skip inside with renewed confidence that made his chest tight with pride and relief in equal measure. By 7:55, he was sitting in Morningside Brew at a corner table, black coffee in front of him, trying not to look like someone waiting for a woman he barely knew and definitely shouldn't be meeting. The shop was quieter than usual, post-rush, pre-lunch crowd, leaving just a handful of laptop warriors and one elderly couple sharing a muffin with the synchronized movements of people who'd been together for decades. Evelyn arrived at exactly 8 o'clock, because of course she did. But instead of the corporate armor he'd expected, she wore jeans and a simple navy sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in severe control. She looked younger, more accessible. Still obviously expensive in that way that came from quality rather than flash, but less intimidating. She spotted him immediately and smiled. Not the professional expression from the coffee shop, but something that seemed almost nervous. Thank you for agreeing to this, she said, sliding into the seat across from him. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either, Jack admitted. A barista appeared and Evelyn ordered a cappuccino with the kind of casual politeness that suggested she'd made an effort not to be high maintenance today. When they were alone again, she folded her hands on the table and met his eyes directly. I'm going to be honest with you, Jack. I don't do this. I don't track down strangers and ask them to coffee. I don't pursue people who clearly aren't interested in being pursued. But there's something about you that I can't quite figure out, and it's been bothering me for 3 days. Oh, what's that? You didn't want anything from me? When you helped me in the coffee shop? When you paid for my drink? When you told me your name? None of it was transactional. You didn't see an opportunity. You just saw a person who needed help. She paused, her expression thoughtful. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Maybe you're in the wrong world. She laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. Maybe I am, but it's the world I built, so I'm stuck with it. Why did you build it? The question seemed to catch her off guard. Her cappuccino arrived, giving her a moment to consider her answer. She wrapped both hands around the cup, and Jack noticed she wasn't wearing any rings. No jewelry at all, actually, except for a simple watch that probably cost more than his truck. Because I was 22 years old and poor and angry, she said finally. Because my father told me I'd never amount to anything. Because I grew up watching my mother shrink herself to fit into his expectations. And I swore I'd never do that. So I built something that was entirely mine. Something no one could take away. Cross Industries. You looked me up. Your assistant left a detailed report on my truck dashboard. Seemed like I should return the favor. Evelyn winced. I'm sorry about that. Marissa is protective. She's thorough. I can respect that. Jack took a drink of his coffee. So you built an empire to prove your father wrong. Did it work? He died before I could show him. Heart attack in his study, surrounded by files from the company he ran into the ground. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but something flickered in her eyes. So no, it didn't work. Turns out revenge is a terrible motivator for long-term satisfaction. What would be a better motivator? I'm still figuring that out. She met his gaze. Your turn. Why construction? The report said you were an army officer. That's a significant career change. Jack considered how much to share. The safe answer would be vague, something about wanting a change, wanting to be present for Lily. But Evelyn had been honest with him, and something about the way she'd admitted to building an empire out of anger made him want to match her vulnerability. My wife got sick, he said. Stage 4 ovarian cancer. By the time they found it, there wasn't much they could do except try to give her more time. I was deployed when she got the diagnosis. It took 3 weeks to get me stateside, and by then she'd already started chemo. He stared into his coffee cup. I realized I'd spent 10 years following orders, leading men, completing missions, and none of it mattered compared to the fact that I wasn't there when Sarah needed me. So when she died, I resigned my commission and took the first job I could find that would let me be home every night for Lily. I'm sorry, Evelyn said quietly. That must have been impossibly hard. What's hard is being a single parent and having no idea if you're doing it right. What's hard is watching your daughter ask questions about her mother that you can't answer without breaking down. What's hard is figuring out how to be enough when you feel like half of a whole that doesn't exist anymore. The words came out rougher than he'd intended, carrying more weight than he usually let show. Evelyn didn't flinch or offer platitudes. She just nodded like she understood that some things couldn't be fixed with sympathy. Lily seems like an amazing child, she said after a moment. She is. She's the best thing Sarah and I ever did. Is she why you're so careful about complications? Jack looked up sharply. What? Your message. About wanting to keep your life simple. I'm assuming that's about protecting her. Partly. He set down his cup. But it's also about protecting myself. I did complicate it once. The high-stress career, the deployments, the constant pressure. I'm done with that. I like knowing what to expect each day. I like routine and stability and being able to control the variables. And I'm a variable. You're several variables wrapped in expensive cashmere. She smiled. Fair assessment. But you know, Jack, life doesn't actually allow you to control all the variables, no matter how carefully you plan. I can try. You can. But you might miss some good things while you're busy controlling everything. She leaned forward slightly. Do you know what I saw when you stepped between me and that man in the coffee shop? I saw someone who acted without calculating risk or benefit. Someone who just did what was right, because it needed doing. That's not someone who's as controlled as they want to believe. That was instinct, training. It was character. There's a difference. Jack didn't know what to say to that. The conversation had moved into territory he hadn't anticipated. Too personal, too probing, too much like someone actually seeing him instead of just the role he played. I should go, he said, checking his watch. I have a job site. Jack. Her voice was gentle but firm. I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. I'm just trying to understand the man who helped me without wanting anything in return. Because in my experience, everyone wants something, and I need to know if you're real or if I'm projecting something onto you that isn't actually there. I'm real. I'm also ordinary. A widowed construction worker trying to raise his daughter and not screw her up too badly. That's it. There's no mystery to solve. I disagree, but I'll respect your boundaries. She stood, gathering her cup. Thank you for the coffee and conversation. It meant more than you probably realize. Jack stood as well, feeling like somehow he'd failed a test he didn't know he was taking. Evelyn, it's okay. You were clear about not wanting complications, and I'm not going to push. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Take care of yourself and that beautiful daughter of yours. She walked toward the exit, and Jack watched her go, feeling something twist uncomfortably in his chest. This was what he wanted, right? To keep his life simple. To avoid entanglements with women who lived in penthouses and built empires and saw him as some kind of puzzle to solve. So why did watching her leave feel like a mistake? Wait, the word was out before he could stop it. Evelyn turned, one hand on the door. Jack crossed the distance between them, aware that everyone in the coffee shop was probably watching but unable to care. I'm not good at this. The whole talking about feelings, letting people in, trusting that things won't fall apart. Sarah was it for me. The one person who saw past all my walls and decided I was worth the effort. And when she died, I built those walls back up higher because it was the only way I knew how to survive. I understand that. But, Jack took a breath. But my daughter told me the other day that she thinks I'm lonely, that maybe I need a grown-up friend, and I told her I was fine, But the truth is, he trailed off, struggling with words that felt foreign in his mouth. The truth is, I don't know if I am fine, or if I've just gotten really good at pretending. Evelyn's expression softened. What are you saying, Jack? I'm saying maybe I could use a friend. Someone who doesn't expect me to be anything other than what I am. Someone who understands that I come with a 4-year-old daughter and a complicated past and a really strong need for things to be predictable. I can do that. Can you? Because you're a CEO. You build empires. You probably have assistants who manage your assistants. My idea of a big decision is whether to use Phillips head or flathead screws. She laughed. Jack, I spend my days making decisions that affect thousands of employees and millions of dollars. I sit in meetings where people tell me what they think I want to hear instead of what I need to know. I go to events where everyone wants something. Access, investment, association. Do you know what I want right now? What? To have a simple conversation with someone who sees me as Evelyn instead of as Cross Industries. To not have to perform or strategize or calculate, to just be. Jack studied her face, looking for deception or hidden agendas, finding only sincerity and something that looked almost like loneliness mirroring his own. Okay, he said finally. Friends. But I'm serious about boundaries. Lily comes first, always. I wouldn't have it any other way. And I work normal hours. I'm not available for fancy dinners or gallery openings or whatever it is billionaires do for fun. I'm willing to adjust my schedule. And if this gets complicated, if it starts affecting my daughter or my stability, I'm out. No discussion. Understood. She extended her hand. Friends? Jack shook it, feeling the same cool grip as before, but this time reading it differently. Not calculation, just control that came from the same place his did, the need to manage variables in a world that rarely cooperated. Friends, he agreed. They stood there for a moment, hands clasped, something unspoken passing between them that Jack refused to examine too closely. Then Evelyn released his hand and stepped back. I should let you get to work. Yeah, and I should probably stop having emotional breakthroughs in public coffee shops. It's very dramatic. I appreciate the effort. Jack almost smiled. Don't get used to it. I'm usually much more repressed. I'll try to contain my disappointment. She paused at the door. Jack? Thank you for giving me a chance. Don't make me regret it. I'll do my best. Then she was gone, and Jack was left standing in Morningside Brew, wondering what exactly he'd just agreed to, and why it felt simultaneously like the best and worst decision he'd made in 3 years. His phone buzzed. Dave, where are you? We need to start the framing. Jack typed back, on my way. Sorry. But as he drove to the job site, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. He'd opened a door he'd kept carefully locked, let someone peek inside at the messy reality of his life. And instead of running away, Evelyn Cross had asked if she could stay. That terrified him more than any combat zone ever had, because enemies you could fight, emotions you just had to feel. And Jack Miller was very, very out of practice at feeling anything except responsible. The friendship, if that's what it was, developed in increments so small that Jack almost didn't notice it happening. A text message on Friday asking how Lily was doing after the bathroom incident. A response on Saturday with a photo of Lily building a block tower that defied physics. A conversation on Sunday about nothing in particular. Just the kind of idle exchange that people who genuinely liked each other fell into without thinking about it. By the following Wednesday, Jack had somehow agreed to meet Evelyn for lunch at a small sandwich shop near his job site. Nothing fancy. Nothing that required him to change out of his work clothes or pretend to be someone he wasn't. She arrived exactly on time, wearing jeans and a leather jacket that managed to look both casual and prohibitively expensive. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she carried herself with less of the corporate armor he'd seen in their first encounters. You look different, Jack said as she slid into the booth across from him. Different good and or different bad? Just different. More, he searched for the right word. Human. Evelyn laughed. That's probably the best compliment I've gotten in months. Most people tell me I look powerful or intimidating or whatever euphemism they're using for Ice Queen this week. Are you an Ice Queen? In the boardroom? Absolutely. It's survival. Show weakness, and people will exploit it. She picked up the menu, scanning it quickly. But I'm trying to remember that not every interaction is a negotiation. It's harder than it sounds. The waitress appeared, and they ordered. Jack, his usual turkey club. Evelyn, a Greek salad with grilled chicken. When they were alone again, Jack found himself studying her with the same careful assessment he'd use on a structure he was trying to understand. "What?" Evelyn asked, catching his gaze. "I'm trying to figure out what you're getting out of this. We're friends, okay? But you're a billionaire CEO. I'm a construction worker. We have literally nothing in common. We have more in common than you think." "Like what?" "We've both built lives around control. We both use work as a shield. We're both protecting something fragile that we're terrified of losing." She met his eyes steadily. "The difference is, you're protecting your daughter. I'm protecting myself." The honesty caught Jack off guard. He'd expected deflection or corporate speak, not this kind of raw admission. "From what?" he asked. "From becoming my mother. From being the woman who gave up everything to fit into someone else's vision of what she should be. From ending up in a loveless marriage in a house that felt like a museum, wondering when life became something to endure instead of something to live." That's specific. That's therapy talking. 3 years worth. Turns out building an empire doesn't actually solve your childhood trauma. Who knew? She smiled, but it was edged with something bitter. "My therapist suggested I try connecting with people outside my usual circles. People who don't know me as Evelyn Cross, CEO. People who might actually see me as just Evelyn. So I'm a therapy assignment." "No, you're someone who was kind to me when you had no reason to be. Someone who didn't Google me before deciding whether I was worth your time. Someone who treats his daughter like she's the most important person in the world and doesn't apologize for it." She paused. "You're what my therapist calls a corrective experience." Jack leaned back in the booth, processing this. "I don't know if I'm comfortable being someone's life lesson." "That's fair. I probably shouldn't have dumped all that on you." "I didn't say stop. I just said I don't know if I'm comfortable with it." He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I get what you're saying about control. After Sarah died, I spent 6 months trying to micromanage every aspect of Lily's life. What she ate, when she slept, who she played with. I thought if I could just control enough variables, I could keep her safe. Keep us both safe. What changed? She had a meltdown in the grocery store because I wouldn't let her pick out her own cereal. Full nuclear tantrum. And this older woman came up to me while I was trying to calm Lily down and said, 'Son, you can't bubble wrap childhood. All you'll end up with is a fragile kid and an exhausted parent.'" Jack smiled at the memory. "So I let Lily pick the cereal. She chose something with so much sugar, it's basically candy. And you know what? She was so proud of herself, so happy. And I realized I was so busy protecting her from potential harm that I was preventing her from learning how to make decisions." That must have been terrifying. It was, still is some days, but it's also necessary. Kids need to learn that the world has sharp edges. They just need to learn it at an age-appropriate pace. Their food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Jack found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't expected. Evelyn didn't fill every silence with chatter, didn't ask invasive questions or try to prove anything. She just existed alongside him, comfortable in the quiet. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn said finally. "Depends on what it is." "Do you ever think about dating, or is that completely off the table?" Jack set down his sandwich, considering his answer carefully. "Honestly, I don't know. Part of me thinks Sarah was it, the one great love of my life. That trying to find someone else would be settling or cheating her memory or something. That's not how love works." "Says who?" "Says anyone who's actually experienced it. Love isn't finite. Loving someone new doesn't diminish what you had with Sarah. It just means you're capable of loving more than one person in a lifetime." "You sound pretty certain for someone who just told me they're trying not to be their mother." Evelyn's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across her features before she controlled it. "I was married once, for about 18 months when I was 25, to a man my father approved of, which should have been my first warning sign." Jack hadn't expected that. "What happened?" I realized I'd rather be alone than with someone who saw me as an accessory to their ambitions. He wanted a wife who would host dinner parties and look good in photographs and not ask too many questions about where he was spending his evenings. She pushed her salad around her plate. I filed for divorce, and he tried to claim he was entitled to half of Cross Industries because he'd provided emotional support during the early years. My lawyers destroyed him in court. It was ugly and public and exactly the kind of spectacle I'd spent my whole life trying to avoid. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me that I'd rather build something real on my own than build something false with someone else. She looked up, meeting his eyes. But lately I've been wondering if there's a middle ground, if it's possible to be independent and connected at the same time. Is that what we're doing? Finding middle ground? I don't know. What are we doing, Jack? The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither seemed ready to examine too closely. Jack thought about Dave's words from last week, about surviving versus living, about being so focused on control that you missed opportunities for something real. I think we're figuring it out as we go, he said finally. And I think that's okay. Evelyn smiled, genuine and warm and completely different from the professional mask she wore in their first meeting. I can work with that. They finished lunch talking about safer topics. Evelyn told him about a disastrous board meeting where one of her executives had tried to pitch an idea using a PowerPoint presentation that was literally just clip art and Comic Sans. Jack shared stories about job site mishaps and the particular brand of chaos that came from working with Carlos and Miguel, who treated every project like a competition to see who could finish faster without sacrificing quality. When they parted ways in the parking lot, Evelyn surprised him by pulling him into a quick hug. It was brief and almost awkward, but it felt genuine in a way that made Jack's chest tight. "Thank you for lunch," she said, "and for not running away when I overshared. Thank you for the corrective experience, whatever that means. It means you're helping me remember that not everyone wants something from me. Some people just like me. Don't let it go to your head." She laughed and climbed into her Mercedes, leaving Jack standing in the parking lot of a sandwich shop, wondering when exactly his carefully controlled life had started spinning in directions he hadn't authorized. The following week brought complications Jack hadn't anticipated. On Monday, a caseworker from Child Protective Services appeared at Little Learners just as Jack was picking up Lily. A thin woman with tired eyes and a clipboard, introducing herself as Ms. Rodriguez and asking if they could schedule a home visit. "Is there a problem?" Jack kept his voice level, aware that Lily was standing right there, watching everything with her too perceptive 4-year-old eyes. "Just a routine check, Mr. Miller. Someone filed a concern about your daughter's welfare. We're required to investigate." Jack's blood ran cold. "What kind of concern?" "I can't discuss details until we've conducted our assessment. Would Thursday at 4 o'clock work for you?" He wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers. But years of military discipline kicked in. You didn't argue with people who held power over things you cared about. You complied, documented everything, and built your defense from a position of preparation. "Thursday at 4 works fine." Ms. Rodriguez handed him a card. "Please have documentation ready. Pay stubs, Lily's medical records, proof of housing, standard procedure." She left, and Jack stood frozen in the preschool parking lot, his mind racing through possibilities. Who would file a complaint? And about what? He kept their duplex clean. Lily was healthy and happy and never missed a doctor's appointment. He was doing everything right. "Daddy, why was that lady asking about me?" Jack crouched down, forcing his expression into something calm. "She just wants to make sure you're happy and healthy, Buttercup. Nothing to worry about." But Lily's face had that pinched look that meant she knew something was wrong, even if she didn't understand what. Jack made a mental note to be extra reassuring over the next few days, to maintain their routine with even more precision than usual. That night, after Lily was asleep, Jack called Dave. "Someone reported me to CPS." "What? That's insane. You're the best father I know." "Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what they can prove." Jack paced his small living room, phone pressed to his ear. Who would do this? Who have I pissed off recently? Could be random. Could be someone who saw you discipline Lily in public and decided to be a hero. Could be anything. But but Jack's mind kept circling back to one possibility. The man from the coffee shop, the one he'd confronted in front of witnesses. What if that guy had decided to retaliate? What if Jack's instinct to protect Evelyn had made him a target? He should call Evelyn, should tell her what was happening. But something stopped him. Pride, maybe, or the deep-seated belief that asking for help was admitting weakness. He'd handled worse situations with less support. He could handle this. Thursday afternoon arrived with the weight of an execution date. Jack had taken the afternoon off work, cleaned the duplex until it gleamed, organized all the requested documentation into labeled folders with the precision of a military briefing. Lily's medical records showing perfect health and up-to-date vaccinations, pay stubs proving steady employment, lease agreement and utility bills demonstrating stable housing, character references from Dave, from Director Chen at Little Learners, from their pediatrician. Ms. Rodriguez arrived exactly at 4, accompanied by another caseworker, a younger man who introduced himself as Mr. Chen and immediately started taking notes on everything. "Where's Lily?" Ms. Rodriguez asked. "At a friend's house. I thought it would be better to do this without her present." "Actually, we'll need to see her, to observe your interaction." Jack's jaw tightened, but he pulled out his phone and called Dave's wife, Maria, who'd agreed to watch Lily for the afternoon. "Can you bring her back? They need to see her." 20 minutes later, Lily bounded through the door with her usual enthusiasm, then stopped short when she saw the strangers in her living room. Her hand immediately found Jack's. "Lily, these are Ms. Rodriguez and Mr. Chen. They're here to ask us some questions. Remember we talked about this?" Lily nodded, pressing closer to Jack's leg. The interview was exhausting. They asked Lily about her daily routine, whether Daddy ever got angry, whether she felt safe, whether anyone had ever hurt her. She answered with the straightforward honesty of a child who'd never learned to be anything else, describing her life with such mundane detail that Jack wanted to weep with relief. Yes, Daddy made her vegetables, but also let her have treats sometimes. Yes, Daddy had rules about bedtime, but would read extra stories if she asked nicely. Yes, she missed Mommy, but Daddy talked about her so she wouldn't forget. No, Daddy never yelled or hit or did any of the scary things they were asking about. They inspected the duplex, Lily's room with its carefully organized toys and books, the kitchen with its child-proof locks and healthy food options, the bathroom with its step stool and child-safe medications stored out of reach. They reviewed every document Jack had prepared, asking follow-up questions that felt designed to trip him up. After an hour, Miss Rodriguez closed her notebook. "Mr. Miller, I'm going to be frank with you. The complaint we received suggested neglect and possible instability. What I'm seeing is a single father doing an exemplary job raising his daughter in difficult circumstances. Your home is safe and clean, Lily is healthy, well-adjusted, and clearly bonded with you. I see no evidence of the concerns that were raised." Jack felt something tight in his chest start to ease. "So that's it? Case closed? We'll file our report recommending no further action. The complaint will remain on file, but unless additional concerns are raised, this matter is concluded." She stood, offering her hand. "For what it's worth, you're doing a great job. Lily is lucky to have you." After they left, Jack sat on the couch and pulled Lily into his lap, holding her tighter than necessary while his hands shook with delayed reaction. "Daddy, are you okay?" "Yeah, Buttercup, I'm okay, just really happy that you're mine." "I'm always yours. That's how families work." The simple certainty in her voice broke something open in Jack's chest. He buried his face in her hair and let himself feel the terror he'd been suppressing for 4 days. The fear that someone could take her away, that his best efforts wouldn't be enough, that the universe that had already stolen Sarah would take Lily too. When he'd pulled himself together, he called Evelyn. He hadn't planned to, hadn't meant to involve her in this part of his life. But she answered on the second ring, and the sound of her voice made something in him steady. "Jack, is everything okay?" "No, but it will be." He took a breath. "Can you come over? I could use some company. Give me your address. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She made it in 15, appearing at his door in workout clothes and no makeup, hair pulled back in a messy bun. She took one look at his face and pulled him into a hug that felt like the first solid ground he'd touched in days. "Tell me what happened." He did.
The whole story spilling out while Lily played in her room, blissfully unaware of how close they'd come to disaster. Evelyn listened without interrupting, her hand resting on his arm, her presence somehow making it easier to voice the fears he'd been carrying alone. "Someone reported you out of spite," she said when he finished. "That man from the coffee shop. I can't prove it." "You don't have to. I can." Her expression hardened into something Jack recognized from that first meeting, the Ice Queen Dave had mentioned. "I have resources, Jack. Lawyers, investigators, people who can make sure this never happens again." "I don't want your money fixing my problems." "This isn't about money. This is about someone targeting you because you protected me. That makes it my problem too." Jack wanted to argue, wanted to insist he could handle it himself, but the truth was he was exhausted, and having someone offer to stand beside him instead of trying to rescue him felt different somehow. Less like charity and more like partnership. "Okay," he said finally, "but nothing illegal, nothing that puts you at risk." Just a strongly worded letter from very expensive attorneys suggesting that filing false reports is a crime. Very legal, completely above board, and intimidating as hell. That's the goal. She smiled, but it faded quickly. "Jack, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen all the way through before you react." The seriousness in her tone made Jack's stomach tighten. "Okay, I like you. More than I've liked anyone in a very long time. More than is probably smart or appropriate given how different our lives are." She held up a hand when he started to speak. "I know we said friends. I know you have Lily to think about and a life you're trying to keep stable. I'm not asking you to feel the same way or do anything about this. I needed you to know, because you deserve honesty, and I'm tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel." Jack stared at her, his mind struggling to process the admission. Part of him wanted to retreat, to rebuild the walls she was systematically dismantling. But another part, the part that had agreed to coffee and lunch and let her into his home, wanted something he'd convinced himself he couldn't have. "I don't know what to do with that," he said finally. "You don't have to do anything. I'm not expecting—" "I like you too." The words came out rough, reluctant. "And it scares the hell out of me. Because the last time I let someone in, I loved her so much that losing her nearly destroyed me. And I can't go through that again. I can't let Lily go through that." "I'm not asking you to." "Then what are you asking?" Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "I'm asking if you're willing to try. Not love, not commitment, not anything that requires you to risk more than you're comfortable with. Just try. See where this goes. Let yourself feel something without controlling every variable. That's not how I work. I know. But maybe it could be. Maybe we could figure out something that works for both of us." She stood, giving him space. "Think about it. No pressure, no timeline. Just think about it." She moved toward the door and Jack found himself standing, crossing the room, catching her hand before she could leave. "Stay for dinner, nothing fancy, just spaghetti and Lily's endless questions about everything. But stay." Evelyn's face transformed, surprise giving way to something that looked almost like hope. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm trying, like you said." Dinner was chaotic in the way that meals with 4-year-olds always were. Lily dominated the conversation with a detailed explanation of the difference between regular elephants and woolly mammoths, requiring both Jack and Evelyn to serve as mammoth experts, despite neither of them having any actual knowledge on the subject. Evelyn handled it with surprising grace, asking follow-up questions and treating Lily's observations with the same seriousness she probably brought to board meetings. Jack watched them interact and felt something shift in his chest, the careful walls he'd built cracking just enough to let possibility seep through. After dinner, while Jack cleaned up, Evelyn and Lily built a block tower in the living room. He could hear them through the kitchen doorway, Lily's instructions on proper tower construction mixing with Evelyn's laughter when the whole thing inevitably collapsed. "Daddy, come see!" Lily called. "Evelyn and I made a castle." Jack dried his hands and joined them, settling on the floor beside the architectural disaster his daughter was so proud of. "It's beautiful, Buttercup." Evelyn said she lives in a building kind of like a castle, but with more windows and less dragons.
I said allegedly, less dragons, Evelyn corrected with a smile. Can't be too sure about corporate executives. Lily giggled and leaned against Jack's shoulder, her earlier stress from the CPS visit completely forgotten in the joy of the present moment. Jack felt Evelyn's eyes on him, reading something in his expression that he didn't bother to hide. This was what terrified him, not Evelyn herself, but the way she fit into their life. The way Lily had already accepted her presence without question. The way Jack's carefully controlled world felt bigger and brighter and infinitely more dangerous with her in it. Because if he let this happen, let himself feel what he was starting to feel, then he had something else to lose. And Jack Miller had learned the hard way that loss was the one variable you could never fully control. But sitting on his living room floor, watching his daughter explain the finer points of castle construction to a billionaire who listened like it was the most important information she'd ever received, Jack found himself thinking that maybe, just maybe, some risks were worth taking, even if they scared him more than any combat zone ever had. The shift happened gradually over the next 3 weeks, so subtle that Jack almost didn't recognize his life transforming until he was standing in the middle of it. Evelyn started appearing at unexpected moments, bringing coffee to the job site on her way to morning meetings, texting photos of terrible corporate art, with commentary that made Jack laugh out loud during lunch breaks, showing up at Little Learner's pickup with the excuse that she'd been in the neighborhood and thought Lily might enjoy the bakery down the street. Lily, for her part, had adopted Evelyn with the uncomplicated enthusiasm of a child who'd decided someone was safe and therefore worthy of complete trust. She'd started asking when Evelyn was coming over, saving drawings for her, insisting that Mr. Trunks needed to meet Evelyn's fancy car with the seats that massage your back. Jack found himself in the unfamiliar position of having someone who wanted to be part of his routine without trying to change it. Evelyn didn't push for more time than he could give, didn't complain about his early bedtimes or weekend commitments to Lily's activities. She simply folded herself into the spaces he offered, filling them with a presence that felt both foreign and increasingly necessary. But the easy rhythm they'd found shattered on a Tuesday evening in early November when Evelyn called him with tension threading through her usually controlled voice. "I need a favor. It's significant, and you can absolutely say no." Jack was in the middle of helping Lily with a puzzle that depicted farm animals in increasingly improbable situations. "What kind of favor?" "My family is having their annual charity gala this Saturday. It's a command performance for anyone with the Cross name, which technically I could skip, but there are business reasons I need to attend." She paused, and Jack could hear her taking a measured breath. "I'd like you to come with me, as my date." The word hung in the air between them, date, crystallizing something they'd both been carefully not naming. "Evelyn, I know what you're going to say, that it's too public, too much, too fast, and you're probably right. But my mother called today to inform me that she's arranged for her colleague's son to be my escort for the evening, a hedge fund manager named Preston who thinks cryptocurrency is a personality trait." Her voice carried an edge Jack hadn't heard before. "I'm 41 years old, and my mother is still trying to set me up with men she deems appropriate. And I'm so tired of appropriate, Jack. I want to walk into that gala with someone who actually sees me as a person instead of as a prize to be won or a connection to be leveraged." Jack rubbed his face, feeling the familiar weight of a decision he wasn't ready to make. "What does this gala involve?" 3 hours of pretending to care about people you don't like, making conversation about portfolios and vacation homes, and enduring scrutiny from my family who will absolutely judge every aspect of you." She laughed, but it was hollow. "I'm really selling this, aren't I?" "You're being honest. I appreciate that." Jack glanced at Lily, who was studiously fitting a pig into a space clearly designed for a cow. "What about Lily?" "Maria already said she'd watch her for the evening. I checked with Dave first. I hope that's okay." The fact that Evelyn had thought through the logistics before even asking him said something about how well she'd learned to navigate his priorities. It also made saying no infinitely harder. "These people you're talking about, your family, they're going to take one look at me and see exactly what I am. A construction worker who doesn't belong in their world. Good. Let them. I'm done pretending that their world is the only one that matters. Evelyn, you're asking me to walk into a situation where I'm going to be evaluated and found wanting, where people are going to look at you and wonder what you're doing with someone so clearly beneath your station. I spent 10 years in the army dealing with hierarchy and knowing my place. I'm not interested in reliving that experience. Then don't! Her voice was fierce now, burning with something that sounded like barely controlled anger. Don't accept their evaluation. Don't play by their rules. Just be exactly who you are. A good man who treats people with respect and doesn't measure worth by bank accounts. That's all I'm asking. Jack was quiet for a long moment, weighing the request against every instinct that screamed this was a mistake. But underneath the fear and the practicality, there was something else. A quiet voice that sounded suspiciously like Sarah reminding him that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was doing the right thing despite being afraid. What time do I need to pick you up? Jack, you don't have to... What time, Evelyn? He could hear her smile through the phone. 7 o'clock. And Jack? Thank you for trying. After he hung up, Lily looked up from her puzzle with two knowing eyes. Was that Evelyn? Yeah, Buttercup. Are you going on a date with her? Where did you learn about dates? Emma's big sister talks about them all the time. They're when grown-ups get dressed up and go somewhere fancy and hold hands and stuff. She watched him carefully. Do you like Evelyn like that? Like holding hands like that? Jack sat down on the floor beside her, struck once again by his daughter's ability to cut through complexity and find the heart of things. I think I might. Does that bother you? Lily considered the question with the seriousness of a federal judge. Does it mean you don't love Mommy anymore? The question punched the air from Jack's lungs. No, baby. It doesn't mean that at all. Your Mommy was the most important person in my life, and I will always love her. But she's not here anymore, and I'm still here. And sometimes being here means learning to feel things for other people. That doesn't replace what I had with Mommy. It's just different. Like how I love Mr. Trunks and also love the new stuffed bear Evelyn gave me? Exactly like that. Lily nodded, satisfied with this explanation in the way only a child could be. Okay, but Daddy? Yeah? If you're going on a fancy date, you need fancier clothes. You can't wear your work boots to a castle party. Jack laughed, real and surprised and exactly what he needed. You're absolutely right. I'll figure something out. Figuring something out turned out to mean an emergency shopping trip on Thursday evening with Dave, who'd somehow gotten roped into serving as fashion consultant despite having the sartorial sensibilities of someone who considered clean jeans formal wear. I still think this is a terrible idea, Dave said, watching Jack try on the third suit. These people are going to eat you alive. Probably. So why are you doing it? Jack studied his reflection in the dressing room mirror. The suit fit well, charcoal gray, simple but well made, transforming him from construction worker into someone who might plausibly belong at a charity gala. Except his hands still bore the calluses and scars of manual labor, and his expression still carried the watchful wariness of someone who'd spent too long in hostile territory. Because she asked, he said finally, and because I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions. That's either really brave or really stupid. Probably both, Dave grinned. Well, at least you look good. Sarah would approve. The invocation of Sarah's name landed differently than it used to, less like a wound and more like a benediction. Jack thought about what Sarah had said in those last days, when morphine made her honest in ways she'd never been before. Promise me you won't turn into one of those tragic widowers who wears his grief like a badge of honor. Promise me you'll let yourself be happy again, even if it feels like betraying me, especially if it feels like betraying me. He'd promised because she'd asked, even though he couldn't imagine how happiness was possible in a world without her in it. But standing in a department store dressing room, wearing a suit he was buying to attend a gala, with a woman who made him feel things he'd thought he'd buried with Sarah, Jack realized he'd been keeping that promise without even knowing it. Saturday arrived with the November sky heavy with the promise of Colorado's first real snow. Jack spent the day in careful preparation, taking Lily to her swimming lesson, doing the grocery shopping, cleaning the duplex with extra attention because Evelyn would be picking him up, and he wanted her to see that his life was under control even when it felt like it was spinning into chaos. Maria arrived at 6:30 to watch Lily, armed with art supplies and patience, and the knowing smile of someone who'd watched Jack resist this exact situation for 3 years. You look very handsome, Maria said, taking in the suit and the shoes he'd polished until they gleamed.
I look uncomfortable. That too. But handsome uncomfortable. She shooed him toward the door. Go, have fun. Try not to punch anyone. That was one time. It was your sister's wedding reception, and you gave your new brother-in-law a black eye. He called Sarah controlling. Fair enough. Just try to avoid property damage tonight. Evelyn arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, and Jack's first glimpse of her stopped his breath in his chest. She wore a floor-length gown the color of deep emerald, cut with elegant simplicity that somehow made her look like royalty and entirely unattainable. Her hair was swept up, revealing a neck and shoulders that the dress highlighted with strategic perfection. She looked like someone who belonged on red carpets and in glossy magazines.
She looked like someone who definitely shouldn't be picking up a construction worker from a rented duplex. You're staring, Evelyn said, but she smiled. You're stunning. You clean up pretty well yourself. She took in his suit with obvious appreciation. Ready to face the lions? Not remotely. Let's go anyway. The drive to the gala took 30 minutes through downtown Denver, giving Jack time to absorb the reality of what he'd agreed to. Evelyn kept up a running commentary on the people they'd encounter. Her mother, Catherine, a woman who'd built her identity around her late husband's name and fortune. Her younger brother, Marcus, who'd taken over the family's original real estate holdings and resented Evelyn's success. Various cousins and business associates who would view Jack's presence as either amusing or threatening depending on their own insecurities. I should warn you, Evelyn said as they approached the venue, a historic hotel that had been renovated into something that managed to be both elegant and intimidating. My mother is going to try to make you feel small. It's her default setting with anyone she perceives as beneath the family's standards. Don't take it personally. What if I want to take it personally? Then handle it however you see fit. I trust your judgment. She glanced at him as they pulled into the valet circle. And Jack, thank you for doing this. I know it's not easy. The gala was exactly as awful as Jack had anticipated, with the added bonus of being more opulent than anything he'd experienced outside of military formal dinners with foreign dignitaries, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than his annual salary, ice sculptures depicting various charitable causes, waiters circulating with champagne and appetizers that were more art than food, and everywhere people who looked at Jack and Evelyn with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disdain. Evelyn handled it with the grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime navigating these waters. She introduced Jack simply as her date, offering no additional context or justification, forcing people to either accept his presence or reveal their own prejudices through their reactions. Most chose politeness over honesty, which Jack appreciated even as he cataloged the subtle ways they tried to assess his worth. The questions about what he did for a living, delivered with the kind of casual condescension that assumed manual labor was somehow lesser. The comments about how nice it must be for Evelyn to spend time with someone outside her usual circles, implying that Jack was a temporary diversion rather than a genuine connection. Jack endured it because Evelyn stood beside him, her hand occasionally finding his arm in silent support, her expression neutral but her eyes promising retribution against anyone who crossed a line she hadn't drawn yet. They'd been there an hour when a woman who could only be Evelyn's mother appeared, cutting through the crowd with the precise movements of a guided missile locked on target. Catherine Cross was 60-something and elegant in the way that required constant maintenance and significant resources. She wore her wealth like armor and her disapproval like a weapon, focusing both on Jack with an intensity that would have been intimidating if he hadn't spent years being evaluated by people who actually held life and death authority over him. Evelyn, I see you've brought a guest. Catherine's voice was cultured and cold, every syllable precisely enunciated. How unexpected. Mother, this is Jack Miller. Jack, my mother, Catherine Cross. Jack extended his hand, noting the fractional hesitation before Catherine accepted it. Mrs. Cross, thank you for having me. I wasn't aware I had a choice in the matter. She turned to Evelyn. Preston is here, you know. He's been asking about you. How unfortunate for Preston. Evelyn, don't be difficult. Preston is a suitable match for you. Well-educated, excellent family, significant portfolio. I'm not a corporate merger, Mother. I don't require a suitable match. Catherine's expression tightened. And this is your alternative? She looked at Jack, clearly weighing how much rudeness she could get away with in public. What is it you do, Mr. Miller? I'm a carpenter. How rustic. The word dripped with condescension. And how did you meet my daughter? I helped her when someone was harassing her in a coffee shop. Oh, you're that one. Catherine's tone suggested she'd heard the story and dismissed it as insignificant. How very white knight of you. Jack felt Evelyn tense beside him, preparing to intervene, but he spoke before she could. Not really. I just did what any decent person would do. Your daughter was being treated disrespectfully, and I addressed it. Nothing heroic about basic human decency. And now you're dating her. How convenient. The implication was clear that Jack had helped Evelyn with the calculated intention of leveraging it into access to her wealth and status. It was insulting and reductive and exactly the kind of assumption Jack had expected. What surprised him was how little it bothered him. Mrs. Cross, I understand why you might think that. You've probably spent your whole life around people who see your family name as an opportunity rather than just seeing you as people. But I'm going to be very clear about something. Jack kept his voice level, conversational, allowing no heat to enter despite the anger simmering beneath. I'm not interested in your daughter's money. I'm not interested in her connections or her business or any of the things you probably think make her valuable. I'm interested in Evelyn, the person who laughs at terrible corporate art, who treats my 4-year-old daughter with genuine kindness, who's trying to figure out how to be independent and connected at the same time. That's who I see when I look at her. And if that's not valuable enough for you, that says more about your priorities than mine. The silence that followed was profound. Catherine stared at Jack like he'd grown a second head. Evelyn's hand found his, squeezing with enough force to be almost painful. Well, Catherine said finally, ice crystallizing in her tone, how very articulate. Evelyn, we need to discuss the foundation board nominations. Excuse us, Mr. Miller. She turned and walked away, clearly expecting Evelyn to follow. Evelyn didn't move. I should go talk to her, Evelyn said quietly. Damage control. You don't have to. I know. But if I don't, she'll make this evening miserable for everyone here. It's easier to just... She trailed off, looking torn. Go. I'll be fine. Evelyn hesitated, then leaned in and kissed his cheek, quick and almost defiant. A public claim that probably just made Catherine's evening significantly worse. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Don't let anyone intimidate you. Wouldn't dream of it. Jack watched her navigate through the crowd, then made his way toward the bar, needing something stronger than champagne to get through the rest of the evening. He was waiting for his bourbon when a man about his age approached, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Jack's truck, and an expression that suggested he found the entire situation amusing. That was spectacular, the man said, ordering a scotch. Catherine Cross doesn't get challenged often. I think you might have actually rattled her. Wasn't my intention. Makes it better. He extended his hand. Marcus Cross, Evelyn's brother. Jack shook it, reassessing his initial impression. Jack Miller. I know. You're all Mother's been talking about for the past week, the construction worker who's corrupting her daughter. Marcus grinned. I like you already. You don't know me. No, but I know my sister, and I've never seen her bring anyone to one of these events, ever. She must really like you. The feeling's mutual. Good. Because Evelyn deserves someone who sees her as more than a trophy or a business opportunity. Marcus's expression sobered. She spent her whole life trying to prove she's more than our father's legacy. Built an empire that makes his real estate holdings look like a lemonade stand. And our mother still treats her like she's a disappointing investment that needs to be fixed. Why are you telling me this? Because if you hurt her, I'll make your life extremely unpleasant. I have resources and a vindictive streak. He smiled, taking the edge off the threat. But if you're genuine, if you actually care about her, then you have my support, for whatever that's worth. Jack studied Marcus, seeing something familiar in his protective stance. You love your sister. She's the only member of this family worth a damn, including me. He raised his glass. To people who see past the packaging to what actually matters. They drank in companionable silence, and Jack found himself thinking that maybe not everyone in Evelyn's world was terrible. Some were just trying to survive their circumstances the same way he was. Evelyn returned 20 minutes later, her expression carefully neutral, in a way that told Jack the conversation with her mother had been exactly as awful as expected. She linked her arm through his without preamble. "Dance with me? I'm not a good dancer. Neither am I. We'll be terrible together." The orchestra was playing something slow and classical that Jack didn't recognize. He led Evelyn onto the dance floor, one hand finding her waist, the other holding hers with the careful precision of someone who'd learned formal dancing from Army protocol videos and hadn't practiced in years. They moved together with a grace that surprised him, finding a rhythm that worked despite his admitted lack of skill. Evelyn rested her head briefly against his shoulder, and Jack could feel the tension draining from her frame. "My mother suggested I was throwing my life away on someone unsuitable," Evelyn said quietly. "I told her that her opinion on my personal life ceased to matter when I turned 18 and started making my own decisions." "How'd that go over?" "About as well as you'd expect. She threatened to make things difficult for Cross Industries. I reminded her that she sits on the board but has no actual authority, and if she tried to interfere with my company out of personal spite, I'd have her removed for breach of fiduciary duty." Jack pulled back slightly to look at her face. "You fought with your mother over me. I fought with my mother over her trying to control my life. You were just the catalyst." She met his eyes. "I meant what I said, Jack. I'm done letting other people dictate what's appropriate or acceptable. I want to build something real with you, if you want that too." The declaration should have terrified him, should have sent him running back to the safety of his carefully controlled life. Instead, Jack found himself pulling Evelyn closer, moving with her to music that was probably worth hundreds of dollars a note, feeling more certain than he had about anything in 3 years. "I want that," he said, "but I need you to understand something. I come with complications, a daughter who will always be my first priority, a past that still wakes me up some nights, a life that's never going to include galas and charity events and whatever other obligations come with your world. I'm not asking you to change your life. I'm asking to be part of it." "That's the same thing." "No, it's not." Evelyn's voice was fierce, certain. "Changing your life would mean forcing you to fit into my world. Being part of it means I fit into yours. I learn about construction schedules and preschool pickup times and 4-year-olds who are very firm about proper block tower construction. You don't become someone else. You just let me stand beside you while you're being exactly who you are." Jack thought about that. About Evelyn showing up at job sites with coffee. About her sitting on his floor building castles with Lily. About the way she'd folded herself into his routine without demanding he reshape it around her needs. "My mother died when I was 12, he said, surprising himself with the admission. "My father raised me and my sister on an Army sergeant's salary, teaching us that worth came from what you contributed, not what you accumulated. He would have liked you." "Yeah?" "He had a saying, judge people by their character when they have nothing to gain. You passed that test the first day we met." "So did you." They danced through the rest of the song and into the next one, oblivious to the crowd around them, to Catherine's disapproving stare from across the room, to Marcus's knowing smile from the bar. For a moment, Jack let himself imagine that this could work, that two people from incompatible worlds could build something sustainable. Then his phone vibrated in his pocket. 2 short bursts that meant emergency. He pulled it out, his stomach dropping when he saw Maria's name on the screen. He stepped away from Evelyn, answered immediately. "Maria, what's wrong?" "Jack, don't panic, but Lily had a fall. We're at Presbyterian Hospital. She's okay, but they want to run some tests and they need parental consent. How fast can you get here?" The world narrowed to a single point. 20 minutes. I'm leaving now." He hung up and turned to find Evelyn watching him with concern already written across her features. "Lily's in the hospital. I have to go. I'll drive you. My car's faster." They made it to the valet in under 3 minutes, Evelyn shrugging off her mother's questions and her brother's concern with rapid-fire efficiency. The Mercedes was brought around, and Evelyn drove with the kind of aggressive precision that suggested she'd done performance driving courses, weaving through traffic, while Jack called Maria back for details. Lily had been playing on the couch, attempting some kind of acrobatic maneuver involving Mr. Trunks and a throw pillow when she'd slipped and hit her head on the coffee table. She'd been conscious the whole time, crying but alert, but Maria had taken her to the emergency room out of abundance of caution. The doctors wanted to do a CT scan to rule out concussion, By the time they reached the hospital, Jack was wound tight enough to shatter. He barely registered Evelyn finding parking, barely noticed her keeping pace with him as he navigated through the ER, focused entirely on finding his daughter. Maria met them outside the exam room, her face apologetic and worried. "I'm so sorry, Jack. She was right there, and then she just—" "It's okay. Accidents happen. Where is she?" "Room 3. The doctor's with her now." Jack pushed through the door to find Lily sitting on an exam table, holding an ice pack to her forehead, looking small and scared and infinitely precious. Her face lit up when she saw him. "Daddy!" He was across the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms carefully, checking her head wound with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done field triage. A goose egg forming above her left eye, some swelling but no active bleeding, pupils equal and reactive. "Hey, Buttercup. I hear you've been doing parkour on the furniture." "I was being a superhero, but I fell." "Superheroes fall sometimes. That's okay." He pulled back to look at her face. "How do you feel?" "My head hurts and I feel silly." "Silly how?" "Like everything's too bright and too loud." Jack's chest tightened, classic concussion symptoms, but he kept his voice calm. "Okay. The doctors are going to take some pictures of your head to make sure everything's okay inside, like an X-ray, but fancier." "Will it hurt?" "Not even a little bit." The doctor appeared then, a young woman with kind eyes who introduced herself as Dr. Patel and explained the CT scan procedure in language Lily could understand. Jack signed the consent forms with hands that wanted to shake, his mind already spinning through worst-case scenarios he'd learned to construct during too many combat tours. It was only when Evelyn's hand found his shoulder that he realized she'd been there the whole time, a steady presence in his peripheral vision. "She's going to be fine," Evelyn said quietly. "You don't know that." "No, but I know she's tough, like her father." They waited while Lily underwent the CT scan, Jack pacing the small waiting area like a caged animal, while Evelyn sat with the patience of someone who understood that some anxieties couldn't be soothed with words. When Dr. Patel returned 45 minutes later with a smile, Jack felt something in his chest unlock. No fractures, no bleeding, no significant trauma. "She has a mild concussion, which means we need to monitor her for the next 24 hours, but I see no reason she can't go home tonight." The relief was so profound Jack had to sit down. Dr. Patel provided discharge instructions. Wake Lily every 2 hours to check responsiveness. Watch for vomiting or severe headache. No strenuous activity for a week. Jack absorbed it all with the focus of someone receiving mission-critical intel, committing every detail to memory. They were gathering Lily's things when she looked up at Evelyn with sleepy eyes. "You came too." "Of course I did. I wanted to make sure you were okay. You look like a princess. Are you and Daddy at a ball? Like in Cinderella?" Evelyn glanced down at her gown, now rumpled and decidedly less elegant after an hour in an emergency room, and laughed. "We were, but this is much more important." "Is Daddy your prince?" "Something like that." Lily considered this, then nodded with the gravity of someone making an important decision. "Okay, that's good. Daddy needs someone to make sure he's not lonely when I grow up." Jack felt his throat tighten. "You're 4, Buttercup. You're not growing up for a while yet." "But I will eventually. Emma's sister is in high school and she barely even talks to her dad anymore." "We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Right now, let's get you home." The drive back was quiet, Lily drowsing in the back seat despite Jack's periodic checks to make sure she was responsive. Evelyn navigated through late-night traffic with the same efficiency she'd shown getting them there, but the adrenaline had worn off, leaving Jack feeling hollow and shaky. "Thank you," he said finally, "for driving, for staying, for everything." "You don't need to thank me. This is what people do when they care about each other." "Is it? Because in my experience, most people run when things get complicated." Evelyn was quiet for a moment, her hands steady on the wheel. "I'm not most people, Jack, and I meant what I said earlier. I want to be part of your life. The good parts and the hard parts. Tonight was hard, but it doesn't make me want to leave. It makes me want to stay more." Jack didn't know what to say to that, so he just reached across the console and took her hand, holding it while they drove through the night-quiet streets toward home. And for the first time since Sarah died, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to do everything alone. That maybe letting someone in didn't mean losing control. It meant having someone to stand beside you when the world got heavy. And maybe that was worth the risk after all. The days following Lily's accident settled into a rhythm that felt both familiar and entirely new. Jack took the week off work despite Dave's insistence that the crew could manage without him, unwilling to leave Lily's side while she recovered from the concussion. What surprised him was how naturally Evelyn integrated herself into their routine, appearing each morning with breakfast from the bakery Lily loved, staying through the afternoons to help with quiet activities that wouldn't aggravate his daughter's healing brain, leaving before bedtime but always texting later to check in. She never asked for more than Jack offered, never pushed for definitions or commitments or conversations about what they were becoming. She simply showed up, day after day, proving through action what words could never quite capture. By Thursday, Lily was bouncing back with the resilience of childhood, complaining about being bored and asking when she could return to preschool. Jack sat on the couch with his daughter sprawled across his lap, her head resting against his chest, while Evelyn occupied the armchair with a tablet she claimed to be using for work, but was actually using to research age-appropriate craft projects. "Daddy, when can Evelyn move in with us?" The question came out of nowhere, delivered with the casual innocence of someone who saw no reason why people she loved shouldn't all live in the same place. Jack felt his brain stall, searching for an appropriate response that wouldn't crush his daughter's hope or presume too much about Evelyn's intentions. Evelyn saved him by setting down the tablet and meeting Lily's eyes with characteristic directness. "That's a very big question, Lily. What made you think about that?" "Because you're here all the time anyway, and you make Daddy smile. And you know how to make really good hot chocolate. That seems like moving in reasons." "Those are excellent reasons," Evelyn agreed. "But moving in together is something grown-ups have to decide very carefully. It's a big change, and changes can be scary even when they're good." "Are you scared of living with us?" "A little bit. I've lived alone for a long time. I'm used to having my own space and my own rules and not having to think about anyone else's needs. Living with you and your daddy would mean changing all of that." Lily considered this with the gravity of a philosopher contemplating existence. "But you like us, right?" "I like you very much, both of you." "Then the scary part doesn't matter. Daddy says being brave means doing things even when they're scary." Jack found his voice finally, running his hand through Lily's hair with careful gentleness around her healing bruise. "That's true, Buttercup. But being brave also means being smart about timing. Evelyn and I are still figuring things out. We're not ready for moving in together yet." "When will you be ready?" "I don't know. These things don't have schedules." Lily absorbed this with visible disappointment, then brightened with the sudden mood shift that only children could manage. "Okay, but when you are ready, can Evelyn have the guest room? Because it has the window with the tree outside, and I think she'd like that." "If that time comes, we'll definitely consider window preferences," Jack said, catching Evelyn's eye over Lily's head. She was smiling, soft and genuine, and tinged with something that looked like hope mixed with terror. Later, after Lily had been settled for her afternoon quiet time with a stack of picture books and strict instructions not to attempt any superhero activities, Jack found Evelyn on the back porch, staring at the November sky with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Sorry about that," he said, joining her on the steps. "She's 4. Subtlety isn't exactly her strong suit." "Don't apologize. She's honest about what she wants. That's refreshing." Evelyn turned to face him, drawing her knees up to her chest. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you think about it? The future, I mean, where this is going?" Jack was quiet for a long moment, organizing thoughts he'd been trying not to examine too closely. "I think about it more than I probably should. Late at night, when I can't sleep, I imagine what it would be like to wake up next to you, to have you be part of our morning routine instead of a visitor to it, to build something permanent instead of just seeing where things go. But I'm terrified of screwing it up, of moving too fast and having it fall apart, and having to explain to Lily why Evelyn doesn't come around anymore, of falling in love with you." He stopped, the admission hanging incomplete in the cold air. "Of falling in love with me and then losing me the way you lost Sarah," Evelyn finished quietly. I know. I think about that too. About whether I'm capable of being what you need, whether I can be a partner to you and a steady presence for Lily without losing myself in the process. You've been doing pretty well so far. I've been doing well for 3 weeks. That's different from building a life. She wrapped her arms tighter around her knees. My therapist says I have attachment issues stemming from my father's emotional unavailability and my mother's conditional love. That I've spent my adult life building walls to protect myself from the kind of vulnerability that comes with actual intimacy. Sounds like we're quite a pair. It's like we're the widow who's afraid of loving again and the emotionally unavailable billionaire. When you say it like that, it sounds like a terrible romantic comedy. Or the beginning of something real. Jack reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. I can't promise you this will be easy. I can't promise I won't panic and try to control everything. I can't promise I'll always know the right thing to say or do. I don't need promises, Jack. I just need honesty and time to figure this out together. I can do that. He pulled her closer and she shifted to lean against his shoulder, fitting there with an ease that felt both natural and miraculous. For what it's worth, I think you're doing better than you give yourself credit for. The whole racing to the hospital thing, staying with us this week, that's not what emotionally unavailable looks like. Maybe I'm just better at this than I thought. Or maybe you make it easier. They sat in comfortable silence while the afternoon light faded toward evening, and Jack found himself thinking about the various ways life surprised you when you stopped trying to control every variable. 6 weeks ago, he'd been a man going through the motions, working, parenting, surviving. Now he was something more. Something that felt suspiciously like living. The following week brought changes that Jack hadn't anticipated but probably should have seen coming. On Monday, Dave pulled him aside at the job site with an expression that meant serious conversation ahead. Riverside project starts in January. They need an answer by Friday. Jack had been avoiding this decision for weeks, comfortable in the familiar rhythms of smaller projects that didn't demand more than he was willing to give. But Riverside meant better pay, real advancement, the kind of opportunity that could change his and Lily's financial situation significantly. It also meant longer hours, more responsibility, and less control over his daily schedule. "What do you think I should do?" Jack asked. "I think you should stop asking other people what you should do and start asking yourself what you want." Dave crossed his arms, settling into mentor mode. "You're good at this job, Miller, better than good. You could run your own crew, maybe even your own company someday. But you're holding yourself back because you're afraid that wanting more somehow betrays Sarah's memory or puts Lily at risk." "That's not—" "Yes, it is. And I get it. I do. When Maria had her cancer scare 5 years ago, I walked away from a promotion because I thought being home more was the right choice. You know what happened? I was miserable. She was frustrated that I'd sacrificed for her, and the whole thing nearly destroyed our marriage because I'd made a decision based on fear instead of trust." "Trust in what?" "In the people who love you to be honest about what they need, in your ability to handle challenges when they come up. In the universe not punishing you for wanting good things." Dave clapped him on the shoulder. "Take the Riverside job, Jack. Let yourself succeed at something. Your daughter will understand that Daddy working hard is different from Daddy abandoning her." That conversation echoed in Jack's head all week, mixing with Lily's innocent question about when Evelyn would move in and his own increasing certainty that what he had with Evelyn was worth the risk of letting his carefully controlled life become something messier and more complicated. On Wednesday, Evelyn invited them to her penthouse for the first time. Jack had been avoiding this particular milestone, uncomfortable with the visual reminder of the wealth gap between them. But Lily had been asking to see where Evelyn lived, and Jack was trying to be braver about uncomfortable situations. The building was downtown, all glass and steel, and the kind of modern architecture that won awards and intimidated normal people. The doorman greeted Evelyn by name and directed them to a private elevator that required a key card to access the penthouse level. "This is fancy," Lily whispered, eyes wide as they ascended. "Like a castle, but straight up." The elevator opened directly into Evelyn's apartment, an open-plan space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Denver and the mountains beyond. The decor was minimalist and expensive, all clean lines and carefully curated art, the kind of place that belonged in magazines rather than real life. Jack felt immediately out of place.
his work boots too heavy on the polished floors, his presence too rough for the refined surroundings. "Welcome to my fortress of solitude," Evelyn said, watching his reaction carefully. "I know it's a bit much." "It's beautiful," Jack said honestly, "and completely terrifying."
Why terrifying? Because this is your real life, the penthouse and the art and the doorman who probably makes more than I do. And I'm a guy who lives in a rented duplex with mismatched furniture and a coffee table Lily uses for superhero training. Evelyn set down her bag and crossed to stand in front of him, her expression serious. "You want to know something? I hate this place. I bought it because my financial advisor said it was a good investment and because my mother expected me to live somewhere that reflected my status. But I've never felt at home here. It's just expensive square footage with a nice view. Where do you feel at home? Your duplex with the mismatched furniture, sitting on your back porch watching the sunset, building block towers with Lily that immediately fall over. That's where I feel like myself instead of like Evelyn Cross, CEO." Jack absorbed this, recognizing the truth in her words, but also the complexity of the situation. "But you can't just walk away from this. This is who you are too. The successful businesswoman who built an empire. That matters. It matters less than you think. Or maybe it matters differently than I used to believe." She turned to look out at the view, the city lights beginning to sparkle as dusk approached. "I've been thinking about what you said, about building something real versus building something to prove a point. And I've realized that Cross Industries isn't who I am. It's what I do. There's a difference." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm restructuring, promoting my COO to CEO, stepping back to board chair. Still involved, still influential, but not consumed by it every waking moment." She glanced back at him. "It means I want time to figure out what kind of life I actually want instead of the life I thought I was supposed to want." Lily, who'd been exploring the apartment with the careful reverence of someone in a museum, appeared in the doorway. "Evelyn, you have like 6 bedrooms. Do you have that many friends who sleep over?" "No, sweetie. I usually just have the space." "That seems lonely." The simple observation landed with devastating accuracy. Evelyn's expression flickered, something vulnerable breaking through her composure, and Jack saw with sudden clarity how isolated she'd been, how much her success had cost in terms of genuine connection. "It is lonely sometimes," Evelyn admitted, "but I'm working on changing that." They ordered pizza for dinner, Evelyn's suggestion, though Jack suspected she usually ate things that came with more syllables and fewer food groups. They ate sitting on the floor of her living room because Lily declared the formal dining room too fancy for regular people, and Evelyn agreed without hesitation. Watching his daughter sprawl across Evelyn's expensive rug, telling elaborate stories about preschool politics, while Evelyn listened with genuine interest, Jack felt something shift in his chest. This was what he'd been afraid of. Not the relationship itself, but the moment when he admitted that it mattered. That Evelyn had become essential rather than optional. That losing her would hurt in ways he wasn't sure he could survive again. After Lily fell asleep on Evelyn's couch, exhausted from exploring and explaining, Jack carried her to one of the spare bedrooms and tucked her in with Mr. Trunks. When he returned to the living room, he found Evelyn cleaning up pizza boxes with the focused efficiency of someone using activity to avoid thinking too hard. "She's out cold," Jack said. Probably good for another hour at least." "She's wonderful, Jack. You've done an amazing job with her." "I'm terrified every single day that I'm screwing her up, that she'll grow up and realize I had no idea what I was doing and resent me for it. She'll grow up and realize you loved her enough to try. That's all any parent can do." Evelyn set down the boxes and turned to face him fully. "Can I tell you something I've been thinking about?" "Always." "I love you." The words came out simple and direct, no preamble or softening. "I know we said we were taking things slow and figuring it out and not making promises, but I'm tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel. I love you, Jack Miller. I love your stubborn independence and your dedication to your daughter and the way you see me as a person instead of as a balance sheet. I love that you challenge me and make me want to be better. And I needed you to know that, even if you're not ready to say it back." Jack stared at her, his heart hammering against his ribs, every instinct screaming at him to retreat or deflect or find some way to protect himself from the vulnerability of this moment. But then he thought about Sarah's last words, about Dave's lecture on trust. About Lily asking when Evelyn would move in with the simple faith that people who loved each other should be together. "I'm not good at this," he said finally. "The whole expressing feelings thing. I spent 10 years in the military learning to suppress emotions and another 3 years burying them under grief. But I need you to know that what I feel for you scares me more than anything I experienced in combat. Because in combat, you can fight back. You can develop strategies and tactics. You can control variables. And with love, you can't. No. You just have to trust that the other person won't destroy you. And that's terrifying when you've already been destroyed once." He crossed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "But I'm willing to try. Because I love you too, Evelyn. I think I have since you showed up at that grocery store parking lot with your expensive car and your ridiculous persistence. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been if I'd been brave enough to let you in." Evelyn's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "So what does that mean? For us, it means I'm taking the Riverside job. Better pay, better opportunities, less fear driving my decisions. It means I want you in my life, really in it, not just visiting the edges. It means I want to figure out what a future looks like where we're both ourselves, but also together." He paused, searching for the right words. "It means I'm ready to stop surviving and start living. If you'll help me figure out how." "I think I can manage that." She smiled through the tears now, radiant and unguarded. "Though I should warn you, I'm going to be terrible at it sometimes. I'll probably work too much and forget that normal people don't have meetings at 7 a.m. on Saturdays. I'll struggle with letting go of control and trusting that things will work out without me micromanaging every detail. Sounds familiar? We can be terrible at it together." "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me." Jack pulled her into his arms, and she came willingly, fitting against him with the rightness of something that had always been meant to happen. He kissed her then, soft at first, testing, then deeper as she responded with the kind of certainty that came from finally admitting what you wanted and claiming it without apology. When they broke apart, Evelyn was smiling with an expression Jack had never seen before. Joy mixed with relief and something that looked like peace. "So," she said, "should we talk about logistics? Like where we're going to live and how to navigate the transition and when to tell Lily this is official?" "Lily already knows. She probably figured it out before we did. Smart kid. She gets it from her mother." Jack sobered slightly. "Sarah would have liked you, I think. She would have appreciated that you don't try to replace her or make me forget her. That you understand she's part of who I am. She made you into the man I fell in love with. I could never resent that." They talked late into the night, making plans that felt both practical and impossibly optimistic. Evelyn would keep the penthouse, but spend most of her time at the duplex until they could find something bigger that worked for all of them. Jack would take the Riverside job and use the increased income to build a more stable financial foundation. They'd tell Lily together, making sure she understood this wasn't temporary or uncertain. By the time Jack carried a sleeping Lily to the car and drove them home through the quiet streets, he felt lighter than he had in years, like something that had been broken was finally healing, like the future held possibilities beyond just getting through each day. The months that followed were messy and wonderful and exactly as complicated as Jack had feared and hoped. There were arguments about schedules and expectations, moments when Evelyn's corporate instincts clashed with Jack's need for structure, days when the reality of blending their vastly different lives felt impossible. But there were also mornings of coffee and laughter, evenings of Lily teaching Evelyn the proper way to build block towers, weekends of exploring Denver as a family unit that felt increasingly natural. Evelyn learned to appreciate the satisfaction of small, ordinary moments. Jack learned that letting someone help didn't diminish his capability or independence. The Riverside project launched in January, demanding more of Jack than he'd given to work in years. But instead of drowning him, it energized him, reminded him that he was capable of leadership and excellence when he stopped letting fear make his decisions. And when the days were long and challenging, he came home to Evelyn and Lily, to a life that felt full instead of just managed. In March, they found a house. Nothing ostentatious, just a solid craftsman in a good school district with a backyard big enough for Lily's increasingly elaborate outdoor adventures and a workshop where Jack could build furniture in his spare time. Evelyn sold the penthouse without hesitation, and Jack gave notice on the duplex that had sheltered him through his darkest years. The moving process was chaos, complicated by Lily's insistence on personally supervising the relocation of every single toy and Evelyn's discovery that she'd accumulated an absurd amount of corporate gift baskets that she'd never opened. But when they finally stood in their new living room, boxes everywhere, furniture in wrong places, Lily already claiming the room with the best natural light, Jack felt something settle in his chest. This was home. Not because of the structure or the location, but because of the people in it. "Daddy, can we paint my room purple?" Lily asked, bouncing with excitement. "We can paint it whatever color you want, Buttercup." "Even rainbow?" "Let's maybe stick with one color, but a nice purple, sure." Lily squealed and ran off to examine her new domain more thoroughly, leaving Jack and Evelyn alone amid the moving day wreckage. "We did it," Evelyn said, surveying the chaos. "We actually made this work." "Did you doubt we would?" "Every single day. But I kept trying anyway." She moved closer, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Thank you for taking the risk on me. On us. Thank you for being stubborn enough to keep showing up even when I was convinced it was a bad idea." To be fair, it was kind of a bad idea. We had everything working against us. And yet here we are. Here we are. They stood together in their new home, surrounded by the beautiful mess of lives being combined and futures being built. And Jack thought about how far he'd traveled from that morning in Morningside Brew. How the simple act of helping a stranger had unraveled his carefully controlled existence and replaced it with something infinitely more complicated and vastly more worthwhile. 6 months later, on a warm September evening, Jack found himself in his backyard watching Lily play with the new swing set he'd built while Evelyn grilled vegetables with the determined focus of someone still learning that cooking didn't require PowerPoint presentations. "Daddy, push me higher!" Lily called, her legs pumping as she tried to reach the sky. Jack obliged, giving her the gentle push that sent her soaring, her laughter filling the evening air with the kind of pure joy that made everything else worthwhile. "Careful not to launch her into orbit," Evelyn called from the grill. "I don't think our insurance covers that." "Noted, we'll maintain suborbital velocities only." Marcus appeared through the side gate. Evelyn's brother had become a regular visitor, drawn by Lily's insistence that Uncle Marcus needed to see her latest accomplishments, and by the fact that this was the only place where he felt like family meant something beyond obligation. "Am I late for dinner?" "You're exactly on time," Evelyn said, "which means you can take over the grill before I turn these vegetables into charcoal." Marcus accepted the tongs with a grin, and Jack watched them banter with the ease of siblings who'd finally figured out how to be friends. He thought about Catherine, who'd eventually come around after Lily had charmed her at a family dinner with brutal honesty about why Grandma Catherine seems mean, but probably just needs more hugs. He thought about Dave and Maria, who'd celebrated the house purchase like it was their own victory. He thought about Sarah, hoping she could see this somehow, that he'd kept his promise to give Lily a happy childhood, to let himself live again, to build something real from the wreckage of grief. "Jack?" Evelyn's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "You okay?" "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" "About how I almost let fear keep me from this. From you, from the house, from everything that makes life more than just getting through each day." Evelyn set down her drink and crossed to where he stood, taking his hand. "But you didn't. You were scared and you tried anyway. That's the definition of courage." "Daddy, Evelyn, watch this." Lily launched herself from the swing at the apex of its arc, landing in the grass with a graceless tumble that would have terrified Jack a year ago, but now just made him laugh. "That was spectacular, Buttercup. Maybe lead with your feet next time." "But that's not as fun." Dinner was casual and warm, eaten at the outdoor table Jack had built from reclaimed wood, the conversation flowing easily between work stories and Lily's elaborate plans for her upcoming 5th birthday party. As the sun set and the evening cooled, Marcus eventually said his goodbyes, and Jack carried a drowsy Lily inside for her bath and bedtime routine. Later, after Lily had been tucked in with Mr. Trunks and an extra story about brave elephants who learned to fly, Jack found Evelyn on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket and watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Room for one more?" he asked. She shifted, and he settled beside her, pulling her close against the evening chill. I was thinking, Evelyn said quietly, about what Lily asked when she got her concussion, about when I'd move in. What about it? She was right, about us belonging together, about building something permanent. Evelyn turned to face him, and even in the dim light, Jack could see the nervousness and hope warring in her expression. Marry me, Jack. The proposal landed like a perfectly thrown punch, unexpected, direct, impossible to ignore. You're asking me? I'm asking you because I've spent my whole life waiting for other people to make decisions about my future, and I'm done waiting. I want this. I want you and Lily and this messy, complicated, beautiful life we're building. I want it legally and permanently, and without any more pretending we're just figuring things out. She took a breath. So yes, I'm asking. Will you marry me? Jack thought about all the reasons he should say no, or at least ask for time to think about it. They'd been living together for 6 months. They were still navigating the complications of their different backgrounds. Marriage was a big step, especially with Lily, to consider. But he also thought about waking up next to Evelyn every morning, about the way she'd learned to make Lily's favorite pancakes even though cooking still mystified her, about coming home after long days to someone who understood both his need for independence and his desire for partnership. Yes, he said, but on one condition. Name it. I get to propose to you properly, with a ring and a plan and all the traditional stuff I didn't do the first time because Sarah and I eloped in a courthouse between my deployments. Evelyn's smile could have lit the entire backyard. I can live with that. How long do I have to wait? Give me 2 weeks. I need to talk to Lily first, make sure she's okay with this. She's going to be thrilled. Probably. But I still need to ask. 2 weeks later, Jack took Lily to the park. Just the two of them, the way they used to do before Evelyn had entered their lives. They walked to their favorite spot by the pond, where ducks congregated hoping for breadcrumbs that Jack never brought because the signs clearly said not to feed the wildlife. Buttercup, I need to talk to you about something important. Lily looked up at him with eyes that were so much like Sarah's it sometimes hurt. Are you and Evelyn getting married? Jack stopped walking. How did you know that? Because you've been acting weird. And Evelyn keeps looking at her phone and smiling, and you built a box in the garage that you hide whenever I come in. She said it matter-of-factly, like adults were transparently obvious to anyone paying attention. It's okay, Daddy. I want you to marry her. You do? Of course, she makes you happy, and she's nice to me, and she doesn't try to be mommy. She's just Evelyn. That's good. Lily swung their joined hands. Plus, her house is really big, so if we all live there together, I could have a room for sleeping and a room for playing. We're staying in our house, Buttercup, the one we just moved into. Oh, that's okay too. It has the good swing. She paused, her expression growing more serious. Daddy, can I ask you something? Always. If you marry Evelyn, does that mean I can call her Mom? Or is that not allowed because I already have a mom in heaven? Jack's throat tightened. He knelt down so they were eye level, taking both her hands. You can call Evelyn whatever feels right to you. If you want to call her Mom, that's okay. If you want to call her Evelyn, that's okay too. And it doesn't mean you're forgetting Mommy or loving her less. Love doesn't work that way. You can love lots of people at the same time. Like how I love you and Mr. Trunks and Evelyn and Uncle Marcus and ice cream? Exactly like that, though maybe ice cream is a different category. Lily giggled, then threw her arms around his neck. I'm really happy, Daddy. Are you happy? Yeah, Buttercup, I really am. The proposal itself happened on a Saturday morning in October, 1 year almost to the day after Jack had first met Evelyn in that coffee shop. He'd planned something elaborate, dinner at a fancy restaurant, maybe a carriage ride, the kind of romantic gesture that seemed appropriate for someone like Evelyn. But when the morning arrived and he saw her in their kitchen, barefoot and wearing one of his old army t-shirts, making pancakes while Lily provided detailed instructions on proper chocolate chip distribution, Jack realized that elaborate wasn't what either of them needed. This was perfect. This ordinary morning in their home with their daughter. This was the life they'd built together. Evelyn? She turned, spatula in hand, a smudge of batter on her cheek. Yeah? Jack pulled the ring box from his pocket, simple white gold with a small diamond, nothing ostentatious, chosen because it reminded him of Evelyn's understated elegance. He got down on one knee right there in the kitchen, aware that Lily was watching with barely contained excitement. "You asked me to marry you 6 weeks ago, and I said yes with the condition that I got to do this properly. So here's me doing it properly." He opened the box and Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. "Evelyn Cross, you walked into my life when I wasn't looking for anyone, and you stayed even when I tried to convince both of us it was a bad idea. You've made me believe in second chances and the possibility that life can be more than just surviving. You've been patient with my fears and respectful of my daughter and willing to build something real instead of something easy. Will you marry me?" "Yes." The word came out choked with tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." Jack stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, and Lily cheered like she'd just witnessed the greatest event in human history. Evelyn pulled him into a kiss that tasted like tears and laughter and the promise of futures neither of them had dared to imagine a year ago. "This is the best day ever," Lily announced. "Can we have a wedding with a castle and a dragon?" "We'll discuss the dragon," Jack said, "but definitely some kind of celebration." The wedding itself happened 3 months later in their backyard, transformed by simple decorations and the presence of people who actually mattered. Dave served as Jack's best man, delivering a speech about stubbornness and second chances that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. Marcus walked Evelyn down the aisle, since Catherine had declined to attend in protest of her daughter marrying someone so clearly beneath their family's standards. Her absence didn't diminish the day at all. Lily served as flower girl and ring bearer simultaneously, taking both jobs with the seriousness of someone entrusted with critical mission parameters. She wore a purple dress she'd picked out herself and carried Mr. Trunks tucked under one arm for moral support. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, Lily shouted, "No!" with such vehemence that the entire gathering dissolved into laughter. Jack and Evelyn exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises about partnership and respect, and building a life that honored both their independence and their connection. When the officiant pronounced them married, Jack kissed his wife with the certainty of someone who'd finally stopped fighting what he wanted and learned to embrace it instead. The reception was small and warm, filled with good food and better conversation. Jack danced with Evelyn to a song Sarah had loved, feeling no conflict between honoring his past and celebrating his present. He danced with Lily too, lifting her up so her feet rested on his shoes the way he used to do when she was smaller. "I'm really glad you married Evelyn," Lily whispered against his shoulder. "Me too, Buttercup." "And Daddy? I think Mommy's glad too. I can feel it." Jack didn't question how a 5-year-old could possibly know such things. He just held his daughter close and believed that maybe, somehow, Sarah was watching. That she approved of the man he'd become and the family he'd built from the broken pieces of his grief. Years passed with the strange speed that comes from living fully instead of just enduring. The Riverside project led to others, Jack's reputation as a skilled project manager opening doors he'd never expected. Evelyn restructured Cross Industries completely, finding satisfaction in mentoring the next generation of leaders instead of carrying the entire burden herself. Lily grew from a precocious 5-year-old into a thoughtful teenager who split her time between school, friends, and teaching her younger siblings, twin boys that arrived when she was 7, the proper technique for building block towers that defied physics. Jack never stopped missing Sarah, but the grief transformed from an open wound into a scar that ached sometimes but didn't prevent him from living. He kept her photograph on the mantle, told stories about her to the twins who'd never met her, made sure Lily understood that having Evelyn as a mother didn't erase the woman who'd given her life. On a warm evening in June, 15 years after that first meeting in Morningside Brew, Jack sat on his back porch watching his family. Lily was home from her first year of college, arguing good-naturedly with the twins about whether superheroes could actually exist given the laws of physics. Evelyn was in her garden, a hobby she'd taken up 5 years ago and pursued with the same intensity she'd once brought to corporate acquisitions. Marcus was there too, along with his partner and their adopted daughter, all of them gathered for one of the regular family dinners that had become tradition. "You look contemplative," Evelyn said, settling beside him with 2 glasses of wine. "Just thinking about how we got here. How one moment of basic human decency in a coffee shop turned into all of this. Do you ever regret it? Taking the risk on us?" Jack turned to look at his wife, still beautiful, still intimidating when she needed to be, but softer now around the edges, more willing to be vulnerable, more comfortable with the idea that love didn't require perfection. Not once, he said honestly. You scared the hell out of me, and I almost let that fear win, but I'm really glad I didn't. Me too. She leaned against his shoulder, fitting there with the ease of long practice. I was thinking we should go back to Morningside Brew tomorrow morning. Anniversary pilgrimage. It's not our anniversary. It's the anniversary of you helping me, of everything starting. That counts. So the next morning, they drove to Morningside Brew. Still there, still serving coffee and pastries, still the place where Jack had made a choice that changed everything. They sat at the same table where they'd had that first awkward conversation about therapy assignments and corrective experiences. 15 years, Evelyn said, holding her cappuccino. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like we've always been together. Both can be true. Do you remember what you said to me that first day? About not being interested in complications? Jack laughed. And you proceeded to complicate my life in the best possible way. No regrets? About the complications? Not a single one. They finished their coffee in comfortable silence, then walked out into the Denver morning, older now, different, shaped by the years and the choices they'd made. But still themselves, still partners, still choosing each other every single day. And as they drove home to the family they'd built together, Jack thought about Sarah's last words one more time. About keeping his promise to let himself be happy, to give Lily a life full of love and laughter, to not let grief define his future. He'd kept that promise. Not by forgetting or moving on, but by learning that the heart was capable of holding multiple truths at once. That honoring the past didn't mean being imprisoned by it. That opening yourself to love again wasn't betrayal. It was courage. And in the end, that courage had given him everything that mattered. A partner who saw him completely and loved him anyway. A daughter who'd grown into an amazing young woman. Sons who filled their home with chaos and joy. A life that was messy and complicated and absolutely, perfectly worth living. Jack Miller had started out trying to protect his daughter by keeping his world small and controlled. He'd ended up building something bigger than he'd ever imagined, simply by being brave enough to let one person in. And that had made all the difference.